Good evening. I am going to read this quick statement. This meeting is being held in person and/or remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. We have Harbor Media recording, and we are recording on Zoom for purposes of our minutes. Is there anybody in the audience or online recording? If you're online, if you could throw up your hand.
And proud parents are welcome to record if you'd like to. Yes. Don't feel shy.
We have a bunch of students in the auditorium here, in the audience here, so you will get to see them shortly. Okay, so we will move over to our next item. We're actually going to change the order of the agenda slightly because we have some young ones here who need to get to bed. So we're going to have item 3 start, which is the school showcase, Plymouth River Elementary School. So I'm going to introduce Greg Lamothe, the principal of PRS.
So I'm right here.
So thank you for having PRS here. This is our 3rd grade. They did a project on immigration after reading a book in class. So this is Mrs. Ream's class. And so they're going to give you their presentation of what they learned about their families.
Our class recently read the book Molly's Pilgrim by Barbara Cohen. Molly's Pilgrim is a story about a Russian girl who came to America with her family to find religious freedom. After finishing the book, we worked on ancestry projects at home with our families. Our assignment was to learn about an ancestor who immigrated to America like Molly and her family did.
We learned that 3 are as ancestors from 14 countries all over the world. Charlie Kenny, Wes Kavanaugh, and Catherine Bakulis will share their family project.
My ancestor's name is Paul Schlansker. He came from Germany, which is in the continent of Europe. Paul came to the United States in the late 1800s and spoke German. He was a scientist, and he came here to do research on dentistry. Later, Paul became a dentist. An interesting fact is that Paul's son became a dentist too. And then his son became a dentist. And then his daughter became a dentist. Now I have over 100 years of dentists in my family.
My grandmother, or as we like to call her, Vovo, has had a very interesting life. She was born in Colombia. A few years after she was born, she moved to Chile with their family because my great-grandfather got promoted as the airport manager of Santiago International Airport. When she was 15, Vovo moved to Brussels to study abroad and learn French. She had a wonderful time there. When she graduated high school, she moved to Miami and met her first husband. They moved to Brazil and had 2 girls, my aunts Patricia and Priscilla. They were married for 10 years. They eventually divorced, and my grandmother moved to Miami with my aunts to be closer to my great-grandmother. A few years later, Vovo began her career as an international banker and worked with clients in South America. She eventually met my grandpa. They got married and were together for 41 years and had 1 daughter. My mom, after my grandfather died in 2020, Vovo moved to Hingham to be closer to us.
My ancestor is Catherine Grammatico Daniel. My ancestor is Catherine Grammatico Daniel. She is my great-grandmother. She was born on the island of Rhodes in Greece. Catherine immigrated to America in 1920 when she was just a little girl. Her family went on a journey to make money and live a better life. They sure were going to have a bright future. In America, Catherine and her family lived in Oklahoma, where she went to school, learned how to farm, and to help her siblings and parents. Then, when she met my great-grandfather, John, they moved to Jacksonville, Florida. They got married and had 2 children. One child was my grandfather, Eleftherios. Albert. The other child's name was George. George would have been my great uncle. They all lived together in Florida for many years. Catherine volunteered her time at the local church as head of the women's organization, and John owned and worked at a restaurant. Eventually, they moved yet again to Astoria, New York. Catherine worked as a seamstress at a custom evening gown company and made beautiful dresses. In New York, she volunteered at another local church. From what I learned, Catherine showed a prosperous life.
Nice job.
So thank you, everyone. That was PRS's presentation on their ancestry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. That is a nice little story. This is what it's all about, right?
They did such a great job. They were so poised and did such a great job enunciating and telling their stories. Congratulations. You should be very proud. You made PRS very proud tonight.
So we're going to move over to some other things, not as exciting, but equally as important. I'll let the kiddos
Thank you all. Thank
lead
you.
by. Thank you so much. And we're empty.
We don't have a clear room.
Seriously, is this something I said? Money, budget?
I know how stressful it is growing up under 200
That's what I
years
said to
of
Joe when I
dentistry.
first met him. I'm an accountant, but I'm not dorky. Okay, before I move over to item number 2, I am going to recognize Tina Sherwood, who will call to order ACES.
Thank you. Adopting the same language that I used earlier, I'd like to call this meeting of ACES to order.
Thank you. All right, so I am going to call to order the public hearing. So the public hearing is something that is required by law. Mass General Law requires us to hold a public hearing regarding our budget every year. So this is the public hearing for the FY25 operating budget. We'll hear from Dr. Adams and Aisha and Dr. Cataldo and I believe Katie Roberts on the budget. And then we will take questions from the public after. So I'll pass it to you fine ladies.
So for the school committee, some of this is repetitive, but we'll go through in sort of quick fashion to sort of give a high-level overview of the budget and can stop along the way if there are still questions from the school committee. We'll begin by just sharing a little bit about the budget process, the budget priorities, the budget drivers, a summary of the financial and enrollment data that we've shared. We'll talk a little bit about the impact of our CBAs, our collective bargaining agreements, and the impact on the budget as requested by the school committee. We'll review the memorandum of agreement and its impact on the budget, and we'll also look at any other budget considerations. So for budget process, you have to go the old-fashioned clicking.
Technology makes your life so easy. That's what they told us.
Some days it does. A reminder of the budget process, we started way back in September. We looked at staffing ratios. We looked at current resources and current needs. We met with department leaders and principals to determine vision for the budget and trying to make sure that our focus was also on implementing the strategic plan. We looked at evaluating the needs and the services and looked for areas where we could reallocate to meet those needs and communicating that with the leadership team. We outlined for the school committee the leadership team's budget priorities that sort of defined our work up to now. A focus on student services. You've heard about the increased needs of our students. Continuing to strengthen MTSS as our Tier 1 focusing on the social, emotional, behavioral health, and academic needs of our students post-COVID. Continuing to strengthen the MTSS, both academic and social emotional, through continued focus on staffing, the schedules, professional development, and the instruction and curriculum needed to support MTSS. Continual investment in our staff to support through professional development that supports those best practices that can meet the needs of all students. And continuing to focus on our facilities, and we've made great strides with around facilities and trying to make sure that our facilities are of high quality, and continual improvement and a focus on making sure our facilities needs are met. We also wanted to focus our work around the strategic plan. This was an improvement plan for the district for 3 years. We're in the second year. We wanted to continue to look for areas where we continue to make progress and have the budget support those parts of the strategic plan. So our budget drivers this year, again, implementing the strategic plan. We know we need to meet our contractual agreements. We have several union contractual agreements that have expired and that we're working towards a resolution and negotiations. And meeting contractual obligations as they are agreed upon will be a continued focus of the budget. We have increased substitute costs, and that's reflected also in the budget. That's also reflected and connected to our contractual agreements, and we'll show that a little later. We've talked about increased fuel costs. That's continuation from last year. Natural gas costs have doubled. HMLP is also increasing its rates. We've talked quite a bit about increased student needs. The estimated costs for increase in our special education continues to rise. The Operational Service Division has also raised tuition for private out-of-district schools. The increase for FY25 was set for 4.69, and we've discussed in past meetings that some tuitions will increase more than that. And in comparison, those increases are larger than they've been in the past years. We talked a lot about increased student needs. We have increased numbers of students receiving speech and language services. We discussed that we're not unique in those needs, that across the state and across the nations, those needs are being well documented in the research post-pandemic. Increased needs for school psychologist services to provide for testing, either at the initials, because folks, we're testing students, or as part of the reevaluation process that happens every 3 years. Increased needs, we've talked a bit about this around BCBA supports to support the SEL needs of students. We'll pause for a second. I think the school committee has seen this. We'll keep going. Some financial and enrollment data, just sharing it again. This comes from the DESE radar tool. The orange being the district, Hingham, and the gray being the state. You can see that we've seen a decrease from 2019 to now, to last year, in the number of, to this year, sorry, the negative 10% decrease in all of students' enrollments. However, we've also seen an increase in our students with disabilities in that same span of 14%. A growth also of English language learners, although the number is very small, and also maintaining pretty steady, but an increase from 2019 of economically disadvantaged or low income. This was data we shared of FTEs of staffing per 100 students. We tend to be in the middle, except for our technology, which our staffing levels would be more towards the end, the lower level, but our staffing levels would sort of fall in the middle. These are comparable districts by the state. Those are districts that the state would say we are very close to socioeconomically, similar demographics. This is our FY23 per pupil expenditure. Again, we're sort of in the middle, and the large portion of our budget is going towards personnel, reflected in teachers. Our FY23 per pupil expenditures, the other one was by percentage. This actually gives the dollar amount and where the dollars fall. Again, majority of our budget is reflected in the teaching line. We've talked a bit about student to staff ratios. We've shared staffing ratios for the elementary, for middle and high school. So you have a sense of where we land for staffing ratios at elementary, middle, and high school. We've talked a bit about increase in special education enrollment data overall, and the increase also of number of 504s. You can see a significant total of increase in our special education numbers, and that's reflected also in the budget as well. We've shared this data by school for special education and by grade level, and by 504 enrollment. I know there was some discussion around could we break down further the 504 data into particular categories, and it had some feedback from our district council that it's best to sort of represent sort of globally, and we can look for global trends in our 504 enrollment, but a 504 isn't really written for medical / academic / SCL needs. It's sort of written specific towards a specific disability that a student might have. So we can look for trends and perhaps share some more information about 504s, but sort of breaking them into those categories is really not something you do for 504s. Again, special education enrollment data through the years, you'll see that increase from 2019 of 13%. And then we hit the pandemic and we've been increasing since then. We talked a bit about out-of-district tuitions as well, and the increase, even though our numbers are slightly lower actually, we still have pretty high tuitions, and those tuition rates, as we discussed, are going up. We shared this data prior. This was an average, all students, enrollment of students in Hingham for students with disabilities, 2022 to 2023, compared to those benchmark comparable districts, to see that where we land. The US stands at 13%. We sort of discussed that Massachusetts special education law is one of the best in the states, and Massachusetts tends to always have had a higher rate than the United States overall. We talked about in comparison to comparable districts where we landed by disability, in our numbers. Pretty consistent looking at this data from 2022 to 2023. We also discussed, we've heard, Barbara and I have also heard from leaders across the state that they're seeing similar trends and increase in special education numbers across the state. Would you agree?
Very much so.
Yep. We shared this data, if you remember, from 2019 to 2022. This was an average. Shows the number of students identified for services, and then the number of students no longer receiving services. By grade, and then we compared that to the 2000, in the next slide, you see the comparison to 2022 compared to the average, and you'll see that increase. We have increased numbers compared, that's the dark orange would be 2022, compared to the 2019-22 lighter orange. And you'll see that we had more students, for example, in second grade and fifth grade being identified. We looked at trends in special education staffing per 100 students. This also comes from DESI Radar. Our comparison to the state, we're above the state in FTEs in comparison to 100 students with disabilities. This is our paraprofessionals from the 2022, I think that's still a typo, 2022 to 2023. We're seeing a slight decrease, but we're above the state average for paraprofessionals. Our comparison by district per 100 students staffing, these are full FTEs. We're pretty comparable when looking at these districts. And our staffing of paraprofessionals by the district per 100 students with disabilities. We're at the higher end, but in comparison equal to Cohasset, Groton, Donstable, and Situate. Situate's a little below us. Wellesley seems like an outlier, pretty high. Any questions? You've seen all that data before. Yeah.
I actually want to point a couple things out too. Oh, okay. Can you go back to slide 13? It is, let me just get there.
The FTEs per 100 students.
Yes. So a couple things I wanted to point out here, because we've started hearing from the community questions that we ended up updating our FAQs on. So I wanted to just point out the leadership. Out of 11 schools, we are second to last. And this is something that came up during the Sustainable Budget Task Force. People will ask, why do we have so many people? Why did we add so many people at the leadership level and the central office level? When we were doing the Sustainable Budget Task Force, we recognized when we compared ourselves to other districts that we were really, really lean in this department. So the ads that have happened over the past couple of years have been trying to catch us up and get us to be right-sized. So I wanted to point that out. So again, of the 11 schools, we are second to last as far as the number at the leadership level. And then at the para level, we're second highest of those 11 same districts. And then right in the middle for the student support. So I just wanted to point that out because I know that comes up a lot. Thank you. That was it.
Carrie, did you have a question? Nope. Oh, sorry. Okay. So the next section, we just wanted to talk a little bit about the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with the town. Are you doing that yet?
In terms of the MOU, some of the questions that we had come up was where did this 3.5% come from? So we wanted to go back a little bit just to provide some history or some perspective in terms of the 3.5%. So the 3.5%, there was even from 2021, the town set up a task force. The town manager set up a task force called a task force to look at the budget and revenue that Hingham as a whole town, in terms of how much revenue we had been making compared to our costs over time. And in looking at the growth of the budgets, both the school budget and the town budget, it was determined that 3.5%, by that task force, that 3.5% would be a good place to land in terms of increases in the budget going forward once we had established an override. And even compared to other towns as well, 3.5% as a number for a school budget can be considered quite moderate in terms of the fact that other schools get less and sometimes some schools get more, right? But we landed in a good place in terms of that 3.5%. Again, remembering that an operational override only gives us a 2.5% increase in taxes. And once we've had that override and we've decided on the things that we prioritize as part of our override, going forward, increasing the budget of the schools even beyond that 2.5% is a challenge in itself, considering the revenue that we earn as a town. But we figured that would be a good place to keep a lot of the resources that we had gained out of COVID. So this is where that 3.5% came from. And when we went into the operational override that we went through last year, one of the things that the advisory, select board, and school committee wanted to make sure is that we remain true to that, in whatever was determined as part of our the task force. That we didn't go away from what had been determined, and we stuck to that. And the townspeople also, I think, appreciated that as well, that once they signed off on the override, there wouldn't be an override in the next 2 years or a year, but they could be sure that our revenue, our costs would remain stable over time until another override would be needed again. So that's kind of where this whole 3.5% came about, and that's what we're trying to hold true to in terms of our own budget this year as well. So that's kind of what, and in terms of looking at one of the things that we discussed as part of the override as well is that we discussed, and I'm just moving ahead because I spoke about most of that.
Go back for a minute. I think there's an important definition in sustainable. I think this is
Okay.
important to emphasize. This
Yep.
is the definition of sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
meaning a financial forecast that uses realistic assumptions around revenue and expenditure growth, that allows the town to provide services that meet residents' expectations and meet ongoing expenditure obligations through regularly occurring revenues.
Right.
Aisha and I weren't here for this process, but this was, I believe, developed by the Sustainable Budget Task Force
Yep.
in coordination with probably multiple groups and multiple pieces of feedback. So that's the definition of sustainable. And so when Aisha shares the 5-year forecast from the town, it's meant, that's the forecast meant to try to meet the definition of sustainable and sort of thinking ahead. An override is this amount of years, 4 or 5 years ahead of us, in order to, our expenditures need to match what the town believes are sustainable revenues. I know, Ness, you were part of that, if you want to add anything.
Sure. It was, so we did it a couple years ago. It was comprised of myself, John Ferris at the time, Gary Maestas, and then we had Liz Klein, who was the chair of the task force, and Michelle Monsegur, who was representing the other town departments. So we met 26 times. We went and scrubbed through our benchmark towns, looked at our revenues, looked at our expenses. Were there any places that we could make cuts? Were there any places that we could raise revenue? The conclusion at the end of that was that we are a town that runs lean, and that we knew that we needed to proceed with an override if we wanted to try to maintain the services that we needed. And there's a report that was done, it was presented to the select board on February 1st, 2 years ago, 2022. I would tell people it was really informative. I think the report that we had prepared is a good 101 of municipal financing and the town of Hingham. So it's a long read, but it's well worth it. So I think that's it.
Yep. Okay, anything else to add? Yeah. So one of the excerpts coming out of this as well, even in terms of, this is more current information in terms of the forecast for 2025 and in the next 5 years as well. And one of the things that you notice is that as of this point in time, which is still very early for us, we're at a negative 1 million at this point in time in terms of the forecast. We will get various cuts of the forecast again. And hopefully by then, we'll get a more accurate picture of the forecast. But in looking at this a second time, as we're putting this presentation together, I was also reminded that looking at the years coming up, 26, 27, 28, that we still do have these huge deficits that we need to make sure that we can close. And we want to make sure that we can continue to be smart about our decision making, to make sure that we can continue to be sustainable in terms of what we do. So one of the reasons why we had this override before was to maintain all the services of the town, and we want to make sure that we can sustain that for our schools and continue to be the premier district that we are. We don't want to break that down in any way. So it's so important for us to be able to maintain what we have. And as part of this budget as well, that's our priority in terms of making sure that we are doing the things that we need to do for our students, but at the same time, being very efficient about what we do and how we do things. Okay. Anything else you want to add, Dr. Adams? Okay. One of the carve-outs of the MOU was also to look at special ed costs as well. And one of the things that we've done in collaboration with the special education department is to look at our special ed tuitions. And we've tried to make sure that as part of our budget, we account for all the tuitions that we have, out of district tuitions that we have for this upcoming year. And we've put, as part of the budget, I will show in a few seconds time, how we've accounted for that increase in the out-of-district tuitions. The three areas that we look at are the specialized services, out-of-district tuitions, and transportation. And transportation and specialized all of these kind of are related to each other, because as you have more kids go out of district, your transportation costs go out as well. And a lot of times too, I don't know if we looked at that before, but in terms of how well we're able to meet those specialized services within our district also helps determine whether we have more kids going out or not, right? So they kind of work inversely in terms of that relationship for specialized services, right? So this is kind of the math and of what we have in terms of special education out of district tuitions. In the slides before, you would have seen that this was near the $4 million range. This year we have a big bump because of the number of kids that we have that are going out of district this year, right? In terms of our specialized services, Dr. Adams and Dr. Cataldo spoke about our need for speech and language and how those numbers have grown so much during the past, even more during the past year compared to the previous years. Also in terms of psychological services, our testing, not only are we testing for our kids, but we're also testing for the private schools. And those numbers have more than doubled. Well, not doubled, but have increased.
They've definitely increased.
They've increased, right? And transportation, one of the things that we've inherited that is actually a really good thing is that we actually provide our own transportation in-house. So the rate of increase of the transportation is not as high as the tuitions themselves, but it also have increased as well. So as part of that, as part of the MOU, we also were to apply all our grants to the MOU, to those costs as well. So that's what we're doing here first. The MOU at the point of time when it was signed, there were specific dollar amounts assigned to each of the budget amounts. This line 24 budgeted costs from the MOU is exactly from here. There's a 2% threshold that we have to jump before we can go to get those expenses. That's what that 2% rate is here. And then over and above those thresholds, we're requesting a $1.4 million increase from the town. Okay. In this slide here, I'm trying to break it down into more detail and kind of show the comparative information as well. The areas of real increase for tuitions are our residential programs. Those residential programs are where kids go out of district for a full year, 365 days sometimes, most times. And in terms of those, they actually stay out. And these provide services for our families and help them and help the students as well. We also have our private placements, where the costs here have also increased as well too. We break down the grants here a little bit further in terms of showing that we're using the IDA grant as well as circuit breaker, which is a grant that we get from the state to subsidize tuition and transportation.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
With the circuit breaker grants, we get reimbursed for that. Is it 24 months after? I mean, I know it's not, but 2 years after?
Right, it's a year after we get
1 year
reimbursed,
after.
but basically the reimbursement is not one for one.
Okay.
We have to jump a $51,000
It's about $51,000
threshold, and then you get 75% of that.
up to.
Up to
And this
yeah.
year,
Okay.
it's anywhere from 40 to 75%.
Right.
As of today, they have not determined what the return will be yet.
Okay.
So it could be 40, it could be 75, but
you know, when you get to the point where something is, I don't know, $65,000, and you take that 51 away, you're left with 14,000. Then fortunately, if you get 75 back, you can see it's a fraction
Okay.
because you've got to pull the first 51 automatically.
Right.
So my logic would tell me that the circuit breaker reimbursements would go up because last year we paid so much more for special education costs out of district placements.
Yes.
But
Yes.
my logic is bad.
Yes. So in terms of,
Okay.
in terms
That's
of,
good.
yes, in terms of student tuition, yes.
Okay.
One of the areas where not so much would be transportation.
Okay.
That, and when we use our collaboratives regularly, sometimes their programs don't make the threshold at all.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. Here we kind of break it out in terms of what the specialized services are all about. You'd see in the 675 bucket, we're talking more of the speech and psychological services here. In terms of language services here, it's more in terms of all of that ELA stuff that we spoke about before, in terms of providing language supports that are not related to speech. Equipment and home and hospital tutors. We do have very many kids actually now where we have to provide services to them at home because they're either hospitalized or there's some level of school avoidance or inability to come to school, right? And
Are some of those tutoring services given remotely? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
We're all given remotely, unfortunately, post the pandemic.
Yeah. And then with ABA specialists, we're looking at increasing some of the services around there, where we have our BCBAs and just trying to make sure we can support our kids as well. Okay. And transportation we spoke about as well. Okay. So this slide, these upcoming slides here, we discussed the impact of our collective bargaining on the budget. It's funny because as we went to many sporting activities over the weekend, we had many questions from parents in terms of what is this and what is happening. So this is a good update in terms of just more of the facts in terms of how it impacts our budget, okay, for 2025. In terms of this, I don't know if you want to jump in and say
Sure.
something. Yeah.
To give you a break.
Yes.
So COLAs would be the cost of living adjustments, and you'll see that the school committee for next year has offered, the budget is based upon a 3% COLA. And so that's one way that salaries increase, but teachers also receive, according to the salary schedule, steps and lanes. And depending on the steps and lanes and where it falls, there's an additional percentage increase. So a step is dependent on years of service. We currently have 13 steps. And so between each step, there's an increase. And in addition to that COLA, that would be added to that step. In addition, lanes go across, and lanes are achieved by additional either degrees or additional credits. So for example, when a teacher goes from a bachelor's, they can go from bachelor's to bachelor's 15, which is 15 additional credits, or they can move on and get a master's. And there's an increase also in salary as you go across and as you go down. So depending on the teachers and their placements and where people fall on the salary schedule, there's that 3% COLA, but there's also can range, as Aisha has there, from 4 to 5% for the lanes, or 0 to 5% for steps, depending on where they are. And so folks will say, well, you have a 3.5% increase to the budget, that should be sufficient for salaries, but it's not, because you have the 3% COLA, and the COLA, or whatever the COLA is, and in addition, those steps and lane increases that raise the salary as well. In addition, longevity is a way also. Some teachers after 15 years will start to receive longevity payments, and that's also an additional amount on the salary that also raises the personnel costs as well. We've offered to raise those longevity in year 2 and year 3 by $500, so that also is an additional increase to the budget as well. That has not been agreed to yet, but we're sort of planning ahead on what the impact of that will be on the budget. And Aisha's created a couple of slides to give you a sense of what that looks like across the salary schedule. So this actually is the placement by degree of the number of teachers. So there's 381 teachers. And you'll see across the top, bachelor's 15, master's 15, and then you'll see across the side the steps, and you'll see the number of teachers. You'll notice one observation you could make is that the largest number of teachers are on step 13. And again, the largest number of teachers are master's 60 would be another observation that you could make. So the majority of our teachers are lying along the right hand, is that the right hand? The right hand corner.
So that would be the upper edge of the salary scale.
Correct. And so in the next slide, you'll actually see the salary schedule for FY25 when we apply the 3% COLA that the school committee has offered. So this is applying the 3% COLA in addition to the 2.5 that we've offered so far for this year and the number of staff. All right, next one. Do you want to explain this one? This one's yours.
And for this one here, what we're trying to show here is the cost of each of the steps and lanes. So the steps, as Dr. Adams indicated, go from 1 to 13, and the lanes go from B, bachelor's, to the doctorate. And as we showed before, we showed the number of teachers at each of the steps and lanes. And what we're doing here is multiplying basically the number of teachers by their salary at that level. And again, an observation would be that at step 13, in total, it costs us over almost $26 million to provide for those, depending on where our teachers fall. And in terms of at the M60 level, we're at 12 million, that being the highest point. So just kind of showing those, just to give you an idea as to how that impacts the budget and our cost structure as well. So that's kind of our rationale for showing this, and just kind of give you an idea. Okay, anything else?
Have you costed out, we're pretty far apart with the union's demands and what we've proposed so far. Have you costed out roughly how many layoffs it would take to meet the union's demands?
I think in an upcoming slide, we'll give you the amount of the difference and the average teacher salary. So we could come back to that with something that'll help us understand and respond to that question.
All right, thank you.
This here just gives us an idea of the average teacher salary compared to other districts that are comparable districts. And we're in the middle as it shows here. Okay, or even above middle actually. Okay. And in terms of another area that has a big impact on our budget for this year is our parental leave for all employees. This impacts us district-wide because it's an offer that the school committee has put on the table so that all employees can take advantage of. Basically what we're offering right now, or the school committee is offering right now, is 12 weeks of paid sick time for 2023-24. The sick time, for most people who are in private practice, it may be a little bit different. It may not be something that you're kind of familiar with, but in Hingham, most public schools, on a year-to-year basis, a teacher or staff or others may get up to 15 sick days a year. So unlike most private employees, you have a sick amount that you obtain from year to year, but you are allowed to have actually 15 sick days a year. And these sick days you are paid for. Those sick days accumulate. So unlike most vacation days in most places, you would lose your vacation days as you move from year to year. But in this environment, you're allowed to carry those sick days on, and they may accumulate from year to year as you increase your service within the school area. So
this is a new benefit, and we're trying to figure out how to account for it. The accounting is mostly in the substitute costs. And to summarize, the school committee has offered for this year 12 weeks of use of accrued sick time. And the school committee has offered for next year 2 weeks of paid, would not come out of the accrued sick time. And then a staff member could use 10 weeks of accrued sick time. The school committee's offered 4 weeks the subsequent year of paid, not taken from accrued sick time, and 20 days of use of 40 days, of use of accrued time. And then in the last year of the contract the school committee's offered to go to the 8 weeks. We've tried to the cost is really in the substitute costs. So based upon 27 people who on average have taken this leave, Aisha's costed it out on the daily rate times the 60 days of an average of 27 people, which is approximately about $500,000.
And you may ask, okay, why the change from one year to the next? But because this is a new benefit for us, I'm using this estimate to try to figure out the costs. But it's difficult, having not had that benefit before, to know exactly where we will land. I don't know, maybe this might be a benefit that might encourage more babies, maybe, I don't know. And then we may have more maternity leaves or opportunity leaves, I'm not sure. So it's difficult to exactly estimate what it's going to be. So just jumping from 0 to 100 makes it very difficult from a budget perspective, and the impact from a budget perspective as well. So I'm trying in this way just to make sure I come up with a reasonable estimate, because if it is at any 1 year during that time, there's a spike, it means that it has a bigger impact on the budget, and we would have to try to figure out how we can recalibrate during the year based on the amount of parental leaves that we have. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
No, but I would just say, appreciate that this is hard to budget for and hard to figure out what the impact will be going forward. But this was something, I think, as a committee that we'd all agreed was really important to us to provide to our teachers and our staff. They're taking care of our kids, so we wanted to make sure that they had time to take care of their own kids, and that was really important. So appreciate that, the budgeting perspective of it and the potential impact overall on the budget. So just wanted to point that out.
And also we heard from them that this was really important.
This was important to them.
And we really wanted to do everything we could. So
took us a little while to get here, but but we listened to that.
It is hard having to talk about numbers when it's something.
Right, somebody's life,
as important as this. But I think it is important for us to understand. So is the $500,000 $496, that's per year, or that's obviously an estimate, but
This is our estimate for next year, based upon what we know now. I think Aisha said, based upon how many people take the leave, advantage of the leave, we may be less, we may be more, and we'll have to monitor that as the benefit kind of rolls out into next year.
And most of that benefit is substitute pay.
And it doesn't, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this. It doesn't change, so the dollar amount wouldn't change as the years progress, because it's coming, from 2 to 4 to 8, because we're already paying.
Right.
Salary.
Yeah. Budgeted for the salary.
Yeah, the budget for the salary.
Yeah,
Sure, yep.
Yes.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Jacqueline, you want to come up?
Hi, Jacqueline Beaupre, HEA president. I just want to clarify, you're saying that the paras Unit B was offered 12 weeks?
I mean, we're still
talking about it, but
Okay.
we've done that with Unit
Units A, and then as default,
Unit D.
C and D.
And
Yeah.
yes,
So,
yeah,
so we've been
Okay.
offering that.
we've been offering that we'll reopen the agreements if
Okay.
Unit A gets.
Look forward to mediation tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was a spoiler alert.
Yeah, I know. They're all like, like, guys, pump your brakes. So the 27 persons here, that's birthing parents and non-birthing parents? Okay, so currently the birthing parents are eligible for 8 weeks of leave. And I'm curious why the cost is attributed to the substitutes for those folks, because they have access to that now. And so the substitute cost shouldn't change for them. It would just be the non-birthing parents. It seems like the cost for the birthing parents is actually in the fact that they would still have sick days that you might eventually have to pay for 10, 20 years from now if they cash out their sick time. So I question that.
So I don't understand the first part of your question. Sorry, can you repeat that part,
I'm
please?
confused as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
That makes sense.
So if birthing parents currently have access to, maybe not as many days as that, but they currently do have parental leave, we are already budgeting for their substitutes, right?
That's not an additional cost. That's the cost of the benefit, that 496. That's not an additional cost in addition to what we pay now.
Okay, so like half of that we already normally budget for.
So,
I believe.
So in terms of that, I guess this is like for all staff, and not all staff in the district get that benefit. In terms of
Yeah, the non-birthing parents, no.
in terms of all birthing parents either, because in terms of I don't think we have that benefit for every. I think the teachers do. I don't think all the contracts
Right.
have that benefit right now.
Right.
So that's a new benefit for a lot of the contracts
Yeah.
this year.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think many of our custodians or admin assistants have been accessing this benefit.
Right.
So it's mostly going to be one that affects teachers and paras, but
You'd be surprised they have
Yeah.
been.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Yes,
27 here
Yep.
does include it does include
sure.
custodians.
Yeah, no, I know it does,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's not probably as much as our female staff that are teachers traditionally. Like that they're the ones that have been using the birthing parent benefit
Okay.
for the most part. But I just I hesitate to see that $500,000 and say that's something that's new to the budget, since a chunk of that we already normally have to budget for, is my point.
So what's the current policy? They get 8 weeks and they don't use their sick time?
Dude.
No, they do.
They do. Okay,
Yeah, so we
got
still
it.
have to have a substitute. So
Got it.
I think the confusion is that this isn't an increase of 496.
Right.
It is just, this is the total cost of the benefit.
Yes.
And I guess we could figure out what it currently is this year.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's the
I
cost.
don't
Yeah.
think we meant to imply that it was
Oh, yeah,
entirely
okay.
new.
I know, this is
Okay.
bold
And in
and
addition to that
underlined.
as well, what kind of happens to us as well too is that depending, and I mean that's within the 8 weeks time, so that probably wouldn't apply. But we also have times as well too where people go on extended leave too, where we also have that substitute cost as well too, right? Yeah.
Okay. And thank you for providing the scattergram data about where people fall on steps and lanes. Mine's on self-report, so I stand corrected. It's not closer to like a third, it's closer to half. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. So in terms of, I think one of Carrie's questions was that the school committee right now is at 3% for teachers. And the Hingham Education Association is asking or proposing a 6.5% increase. We've calculated the difference between those two proposals as being almost a $2.4 million differential. For that differential, we're looking at plus longevity to our proposal. I think for longevity, we're kind of very close on that one as part of packages, etc. But in terms of that 2.4 million, on average, we're looking at about $108,000 per teacher. On average, the cost of a teacher is about $108,000. And Carrie, I think that would give us about, let's see, as we look at the total, including this plus what the Unit B is asking for as well, the total is probably going to get us about 44 people, teachers, if we had to go the teacher route. So this is just the teachers.
Except
As we
Alicia,
move on.
we wouldn't be using the average teacher salary. It would be sort of the newest teachers who would be let
Coming
go
on.
first. So it would
Right.
be more teachers than the average salary.
Exactly.
But remember the scattergram of where people
Right.
lie. We would not be at that first initial salary
Right.
because the majority of our staff are a little
Right.
lower, even at because it also would vary by department and level. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be an easy like, oh, we could use that lowest salary for everyone.
Right. So my
Right.
point is that if we calculate how many positions would be lost at the average rate, it's actually we're underestimating how many positions would be lost.
Correct.
Okay.
It could be more.
Yeah.
In terms of Unit B, we're about $2 million apart. And for Unit B, we've offered 19% in '24, plus 4% in '25, which is, for this year, 2025, the budgeted year, we're looking at 3.8 million in total. The HEA is 43% this year and 43% in 2025 as well. So about 86% there, and we are about 23% in terms of the increase in total. So that differential puts us about 2 million apart. Okay.
And that 2 million in this case is, we're just talking about next year's budget. There are
Yes.
obviously are the implications to this current year's budget that we'd have to figure out as well.
Right.
But I just wanted
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could have shown
No, it makes
the
sense.
cumulative magnitude of this, but I didn't. I just wanted to focus on the impact for 25.
Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you. In terms of Unit D, we have Unit D would be our admin assistants. We're at 3% in terms of what we're offering as well. And in terms of the HEA, they're asking for 5%. And in this case here, they're asking for 5%. And I didn't take into consideration that impact as well. But they're also looking at collapsing. We're moving from, is it 7 steps, Dr. Adams? Down to 3. 10 steps down to 3, right? So it's also like a huge cost as we collapse those steps as well, because somebody who was on an earlier step would be at a much higher level as well too. Okay? So that's a differential. So in total, to be honest, I think from just kind of the discussion that we've had, we'd love to be able to say to all our teachers and paras and everybody like that, okay, this is, we can't put worth next to, or how much our appreciation of our staff is to a dollar value, because there's no dollar value that we could possibly put next to them, because, our appreciation of them. But if we could, I don't think there's anybody who would say no, we'd hold it back if we could. But I think in terms of this, it means that we are at almost $5 million apart for 2025. And the cost and burden that we put on our schools is ginormous, right? And not really sustainable.
Let me pause for questions.
Sure.
Anybody have questions first?
I have a question. And you kind of just answered it, but could you explain, once we come to a conclusion with the negotiations, we're talking about 2025 now, what happens for 2024? We have to back pay the contracts to the beginning of the year.
Right.
And then if we have similar overages, how does that impact where we stand for the rest of this year and then?
Right. And I mean, there's a couple of things that are happening now too. We're in February now, right? It feels like March already. We're in February now, and hopefully we'll come to some kind of agreement very soon. And depending on the language that we agreed to as part of the contract, usually we would go back to the beginning and provide a retro pay, but it all depends on when that happens, right? The end of the school year is June, so we don't know if it does get ratified by June. If it goes beyond that time, we don't have the ability to carry forward either. So that could mean if we don't get it done soon, that could be lost as well.
Right, it's illegal to carry money over from year to year, right?
Yeah.
We'd have to work with the town to figure out
Figure out
how that would
something.
happen.
Yep.
Right. But I think all of us would like to have it done as soon as possible. I
think everybody involved.
Nobody wants to go to June.
Yep.
Yes.
One I guess, story that, or way out of this that I believe, and probably Jacqueline can speak to this more, that I believe the HA is proposing is using fund balance as a Band-Aid to the next override for this. Can you maybe talk about that, explain why that's not fiscally what we ought to be doing?
Right.
I don't know if you can ask that more eloquently than I can, Jacqueline,
Right.
maybe. But.
Is that your question? I guess you have a way for.
I'd love to comment.
Right.
Ben, I see your hand up, so I will call on you shortly.
Actually, I do want to have one clarifying question. Maybe I misheard. Are you suggesting that you would not be able to provide retro pay for
But it all depends
Year
on
one?
on when we agree. If
So
we
you're
agree-
thinking if we reach an agreement after June, you would not be providing retro pay? Is that what you're
I don't
claiming
know.
right now?
I don't know if I can say that.
I think
I
it's
don't know
something
that I can
needs
say
to be
that.
discussed with the town.
Yeah.
It's not something that,
There's an accounting treatment that would have to be done in order to take the retro pay, because if we didn't spend the money this year,
Yeah.
you can't just be like, oh, we'll just hold it and then pay it some other time. There's just an accounting treatment we'd have to work out with the town to figure out how we could take the retroactive pay
Cool.
and put it someplace so that it could be spent. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just
And
going
I
to
think-
settle a contract
yeah.
before then, so you don't have to do
Well,
that.
yeah, exactly. Let's definitely do that.
Glad
Let's
to hear
definitely
it.
do that.
Yeah, I did. I spent some time on the weekend looking, and the week before, looking at town bylaws in Hingham, which was a fun read. And I learned that it turns out the unassigned fund balance needs to be not 16 to 18% of total annual expenditures, but 16 to 20%.
Right.
And it looked to me like it was above 20%. It was like 21% or something. So it seemed to me like there was some wiggle room. I also learned that we don't get the newest estimates for the unassigned fund balances until February, March. Is that correct? Yeah. But the deadline for turning in a warrant article to use those funds is in January. Correct?
January 20th,
20th.
most departments have to propose what their warrants are going to be.
Are you one of those departments?
We are, however, I will also point you to the bylaws. There was a lot of discussion. They had updated the policy. They update the policy frequently. And the 16 to 20% is the town policy, and it will say that it should be used only for one-time occurring expenses. So that means it could be used for ongoing recurring expenses like salaries. However, the only reason why that word was kept in there at the time, to my recollection, because I was listening to all these meetings, was because we were in the middle of the pandemic at the time, and they did not want to be able to restrict us if another pandemic or some other event was to happen, that they couldn't use the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance, to use it in those times. However, they are likely, and they being the AdCom and the select board, we can't make that decision. They will likely say we cannot use the unassigned fund balance for salaries.
Sure, they could say that. So I was wondering, because the warrant articles aren't published or anything yet. So since they had to be turned in by January 20th, did you submit a warrant article to use any unassigned fund balances?
No.
No, it's
You
not
did
our
not.
position to do that.
Okay. And I also had some time to watch some select board meetings. And I learned that some other departments fund overtime, which is my understanding is salaries, through the unassigned fund balance because they're understaffed and then have to pay overtime. So it's a recurring salary expense due to understaffing. So it seems like it is possible to use the unassigned fund balance to pay salaries when they seem to be happening in a reoccurring way. So there seems to be a precedent for that. So I was wondering if you could address that.
It is something that during the Sustainable Budget Task Force that they discussed as well, recognizing we were a town that runs lean. For instance, the fire department is one where you have to have a minimum number of people on staff. If those people call out, as you pointed out, then the people who are stepping in get overtime. So we have a department that is too lean. Therefore, that was the reason for the override in those departments. They wanted to ensure that they got the staffing that they needed so that they could schedule out the police force and the fire department so that they had the adequate amount. And that was to basically right-size those departments, similar to what happened with the schools. We wanted to make sure that we right-sized for not having this number of staff that we needed from the East opening back in 2008. So that was the point of the whole override, was to right-size all of the departments to make sure that we didn't have that issue anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned because it seems like we are, for the paraeducators at least, understaffed. And in order to fully staff, we need to have higher salaries and a living wage. So it seems to me like kind of like a similar problem where we're legally obligated to have more staff. And so you're kind of like leaving the firehouse of Hingham Public Schools unattended. That's what it seems like to me. And we didn't make a plan to use the unassigned funds like it seemed like was a possible thing, knowing that we might hit deficits. So I'm concerned about that. And I hope it's not gonna happen in future years.
Right. I'm hoping that once we get this contract settled, we will be able to obtain people and keep them here. So I'm hoping that those contracts get signed and done quickly.
And I think just to clarify on the salaries being recurring and overtime being recurring, although it has continued to happen year over year, I don't think it was the intent, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my history with AdCom, that it wasn't, the overtime pay is considered outside of the traditional salary bucket because it is overtime and it is a different type of wage. And so they paid it out of that, expecting that at some point it won't be a recurring expense versus an actual contractual obligation to pay X dollars over the years. Thank you.
And I guess was just what I was poking at with the question was, what happens if we use the fund, if we were able to and found a way to do this and used fund balance as a Band-Aid. I do not think it is at all a guarantee that the next override would pass. What happens if that override fails, if we've used fund balance as a Band-Aid to get there?
Well, the challenge would be, even if we had fund balance, it would address 1 year. We'd still have the expense the following year, and it would have to be addressed. And whether advisory, the town, select board would allow us to access those funds on a yearly basis to address salaries is a question.
Right.
Right, and that's why we don't want, it would be responsible to enter into a contract based on maybe an override will pass in a few years.
And I think part of your personnel report tonight, you're going to talk about paras and where we are. How many, just offhand, how many do we still need? And I know it's constantly fluctuating, but.
Give me a minute, I'll find it.
Sorry. Asking you that question off.
Was not ready for
Your
it
order.
at the moment. I believe we had a resignation at South, so we now have 2 at South. 1 at Foster that is a part-time. We hired someone part-time. We're trying to fill the other half of that. The person only wanted to work part-time.
And we have a person that is willing to fill that part-time role at Foster.
Yep, I think 2 or 3 of these, we have people in the pipeline, but we didn't account for them if they weren't hired and signed. So 2 at South, 1 at Foster, 2 at the middle school, and 1 at the high school.
And I'm sure Aisha could give us some numbers on what that means as far as what we budgeted at the for fiscal 24 and where we are right now compared to where we thought we would be, what that total amount is.
In terms of the paras, just from hearing what Dr. Adams just mentioned right now, we've at certain points we've had like almost the full number of people, but it's just kind of, and it's not new to this year at all. It happens every year where we have a lot of our paras come in expecting to become teachers at some point. So you have a few people come in and they get teaching jobs and they leave, or they get other opportunities and they leave for those opportunities. So you do have a lot of fluctuation. So I don't think we're far. I don't have the specific numbers on it right now, but we're not far apart in terms of how much we've utilized paras over the time. Okay. And just to remember that, I know that a lot of the paras that we need are contractually needed right now, but remember that we're also still, compared to other districts, in terms of our use of paras, it's still a lot higher than other places as well. So I think it would be prudent for us to start looking at, as in the longer term, ways to make sure that we become more in line with what the norm is in terms of our use of paras.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Ben Lockheim. Thank you for hanging on for us here, Ben. He's online. If you don't mind unmuting him, Sherry. I don't know if he has to unmute himself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Could you state your name and address?
Yes, sorry, I can't turn on video either, I hope that's okay. Ben Lockheim, 15 Gardner Street. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just a few questions. On the slides, and I kept hearing, I couldn't hear the entire presentation, so I apologize if there was any misunderstanding, but on the slides, it showed 3% was the offer for teachers for Unit A. That's not accurate. The offer is 2.533.
It's for
Wait,
next
this is
year.
for next
we're
year.
discussing the fiscal year 25 budget.
Yeah, that's for fiscal 25 we're talking about.
You're saying specifically for the fiscal year 25?
Yes.
Yes, this is the fiscal 25 budget.
Okay, and then another question about the salaries. When you were saying they're slightly above average, did you guys consider health insurance in that factor? And the cost of health insurance compared to other towns, was that in that data that you guys put on the PowerPoint as well?
No, that's not included in there.
Okay, we've had this discussion before. I think it would be important if we're talking about take-home pay, what actually goes into teachers' bank accounts, to consider that as well, or to have that information out there. I think it's misleading to not include that information. As we all know that we pay 50%, which is by far the most you can pay in the state of Massachusetts. So I'd appreciate it if you could put that information out there as well.
Yeah, we could.
When you're including the teacher salaries.
Yeah, I think we can't include it in salaries because it's not the salary, but we could include a separate chart mapping the insurance that Hingham pays versus other districts. But and thanks, sorry, does the salary chart include longevity payments, or is it just, okay, I was just wondering, okay. But yeah, I think we could do a chart that shows insurance.
I think that'd be very important context for people in the community to know.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
and
we're still,
I think
even with insurance, we've already looked at that as well. Even with insurance, we're still very competitive in terms of our salaries.
Yeah.
And we looked at that before too. So yes, we're probably not at the top, but we're still competitive.
And if we're going to do that, I think, to Michelle's point, I think we have to include the full financial package, the longevity, as well as insurance, because it's the full package of what a teacher is receiving.
Sure, include, I guess, longevity compared to other towns' longevity, all of it. Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're going to talk about teachers' pay, it's important. Health insurance is a huge cost, but to leave that out, I think is not telling the whole picture. So I agree. I think we should include everything as far as what negotiations comes to and what the teacher salary will be in 2025.
I guess the one thing I would say about this is the budget hearing for the fiscal year 25 budget. So it's not really, negotiations definitely impact it, which is why we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not a negotiations update, and where we might put something like that. We've talked about, I think we've done some analysis on that just internally, and we could certainly put it on our website for information
I
for
think
people.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
not.
I guess I'm just saying that if we're talking about salary, it just doesn't really tell the whole picture.
Right, but
But I understand what you're saying.
Yep, to Carrie's point, on the insurance, we don't pay for that through our budget here. That gets paid for at the town part. So when we're talking about the fiscal 25 budget, we can't necessarily show that because it's not a cost to us. But we can put that out on our website.
I understand, but I'm just saying, if you're comparing to other towns, as far as our salary and all of that it encompasses, I think it would be good to include all that it encompasses. I think you can't just cherry pick and say, well, we're not going to include that part, but we won't include this part. I think if we're talking about salary and comparing to other towns that have those charts, it's important to tell the whole story. I know that you're saying just strictly to the budget all staff, but I think it's important to include that as well.
We do have the chart on our website comparing with healthcare costs.
I hear you, but I also don't want to confuse the message too here because this is for fiscal 25 budget for the school department. So I don't want it to look, it's not like we're cherry picking. We're picking the numbers that the school department's responsible for. So it might confuse the story if we're including health insurance here because we don't pay for that out of the school department budget.
Perhaps in collaboration with the salary negotiations subcommittee, we can
Yeah.
present
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
at the next meeting.
Yep.
So we have that information already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on our website, and we can present it at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Share it.
helpful.
Yeah.
And to Michelle's point, to pull the whole package together.
Right. So, yeah, we'll get that presented at our next meeting.
All right,
Thank you.
And Sherry? Oh, I have the clicker, sorry. I lost him. I think I lost the control, Sherry. Off and on. Okay. Thankfully, we also have a few contracts that we've settled that we're very happy to mention here as well. The custodial and maintenance contract we've agreed to, as well as the bus and van drivers, and we've included the cost of those for 25 here as well. Okay. Oops, I'm going back and forth. I'm enjoying watching it, so I'm gonna go back in here. And here I'm just showing the total cost in terms of Unit A, B, C, D, and our finalized contracts as well. The other costs, salary costs that we don't have included in here, that would also be part of our, I have a chart coming up next. We have substitute costs would also be a salary cost for us. The tutors would be another cost that's not included in here. Administrators are not captured here. Both building administrators and central office administrators. So, and also central office support staff as well is not included in here. So there are a lot of other costs. This is just part of the personnel costs that we're looking at. Those are the unionized, but there are a whole other costs that are not unionized that also increase the total cost of our personnel line as well.
But you've included COLA in those lines
Yes,
as well? Okay,
exactly.
great.
So it doesn't include the interventionists, those
No.
positions?
It's just, yeah, just these here.
And the nurses? Is it-
And, but the nurses are also teachers under the HEA, so they're part of, yes, yes, there's the PCBAs as well, exactly. Okay, and then, so that just kind of leads us to this slide here, just to kind of remind people that 80% of our budget is really personnel. So if you did the math before and did the 50 million over our total, it wouldn't come to 80 because there are other costs and personnel costs not included on that first slide before, right? And then we also have contractual services in terms of our tuitions, in terms of our many other contracts as well. And we have non-contractual in terms of supplies, textbooks, material, repairs and maintenance, and other things like that. Okay. This we've seen before in terms of looking at our budget overall. One change to this that I wanted to bring to your attention. I don't know, Dr. Adams, if you wanted to address the increase in our deficit and our need to increase our reduction line. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
That's coming up in a couple lines.
So,
We're
yes.
adding 2 reductions in order to ensure at the middle school and high school. Those are coming up in order to assure reasonable caseloads for our related service providers. We've talked about related service providers, increase in speech and language and services. And so we feel because of increased numbers and in order to provide reasonable caseloads that we need to make sure that we have additional funds in order to support additional contracted services or speech and language, OT, not necessarily PT, but OT and perhaps also school adjustment counselors. So we'll show that in a slide coming up in a
Right.
minute.
But the reason why I mentioned it here, Sherry, if you could just move the green line for me, please. Thank you so much. Nope, sorry. Let me go back a little bit. So the 678, you'd have seen an increase in that number here from 560 before. So just wanted to point it out at this point in time in terms of that. Okay?
And we'll show you in a slide where that's coming from.
Where that's coming
in a
from.
second. So just hold
Okay.
on.
All right. So one of the things to just bring to your attention here, so we have the budget in terms of some of the lines that we've decreased are the textbook lines, the materials and supply lines, to be able to, some of those increasing costs we spoke about in terms of personnel costs increasing, heating increasing, and some of our utility costs going up. In order to meet those costs, we've had to reduce some areas in terms of our curriculum lines, our technology lines, and our repairs and maintenance lines. So those have been able to be reduced, as well as we've increased our use of grants and revolving this year as well. And in the line coming up, so right here you see that there's 5.4 million or 5.5 million of grants and revolving. The 1.4 million in terms of what we spoke about as far as the town's contribution for this year. And just thinking about the town's contribution of that of the MOU in terms of that 1.4 million, it's going to have to be a reserve fund transfer. So that will also reduce the amount of money we have in reserves for this coming up year, given that amount that we have to pay towards tuitions as well, right? So it'll be a further reduction of that reserve amount, just to bring that to your attention as well. And then the deficit we're going to speak more about the deficit coming up as well, okay? In terms of this here, what we're doing here is just kind of showing our use of our revolving funds over time.
I'm sorry.
So go back again?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
So I just want to talk about ask more questions about the teaching line, just draw attention to that, because it's, when you look at the 3 years, when you start back FY23, it's at 29,717, and then 24 would be 29,218. And there would have been a increase in COLAs from that year to the next.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to reflect that in
Right.
that
So,
line. Is
so
that because
one of the-
you moved
yes. Right.
buckets of
Yep.
personnel to
Yep.
a different line?
So there
Is
are
that
two
correct?
things. So yes, so there are two things happening here, or maybe more than two things, but so what's happening here is that in 22-23, what I have not done as part of putting this together in 24-25, we've tried to align the budget and we've reclassified certain lines to put it more in line with our end of year reporting that we need to do. So in some years and in the previous years, we've had some of those, a little bit of a mismatch in some lines. And what we have not spent the time to do is to go back into all of those individual lines and reclassify them to match them up exactly the current line. So in some times you'll see there's a little bit of a mismatch of things, and I can explain it, and I will. But just to kind of give you overall, that's what's happening here. So as an example, one of the things that we did a couple of things here in 3 lines. So one of the things that, in terms of, for example, in the past, our instructional technology included computer science teachers, for example, who were included as part of our instructional technology in terms of those people who are part of the Joe Andrews department, right? So we had Joe Andrews department and all of the computer science teachers in that same grouping as being instructional technology. But those computer science teachers are more, they should be reflected as teachers within the teaching line. And those people who are part of, so to speak, the Joe Andrews group are like kind of separate from the teachers. So what I did this year is that I kind of separated that line and put those people into the teaching line. So even just looking at,
Yes, you can see
if you look at, for example, the technology line, you see it has gone down a bit from 23 and 24, right? And 23 and 24, because I moved them into the teaching line. So that's one area, right? Another area that we adjusted for as well is in terms of a lot of our psychological services, in terms of our people who are our team chairs and our psychologists. Those services are more in line with special ed services than they are with regular ed services. So one of the things that we did this year as well is that we moved those people down into the special ed department, right? So for example, if you look at the psychological services line, it's not as it was. We changed that whole line in terms of that one down a bit as well too. But if you look at prior times, that wasn't the case as well. In terms of the teaching line, What we saw happening, and we're looking towards fixing that this year as well, is that if you look at the differential between 22, 23, 23, 24 for regular education, and you compare it for special education, you will see that there's a bigger jump in increases for special education than there is for regular education. When I look at the individual people that are booked to those lines, I can tell that there's a mismatch in terms of people being booked to the wrong places as well. So what we work towards doing this year is to make sure everybody's lined up into the right department. So it's kind of a work in progress, and I'm sorry that in a perfect world.
I just want to.
Right, in the perfect
I've
world.
asked this question many times
Yes.
to Aisha through finance meetings,
Right.
and you've been very nice to explain it to me. And I
Yep.
just wanted to hear it one more time so that the
Right.
public could hear it as well. Just roughly, we were saying that's probably about 250, 260 teachers in that teaching line, and then there's another big chunk of that would be
special education.
80, 85 special education.
Right.
Okay.
And then, I mean, in a perfect world, what I would do is that I would go back and line up every single thing. But just in terms of the time commitment to be able to do that, we just weren't able to get there. So we just want to try to fix it and move forward with it in that way, right? So I apologize for
Yeah,
that.
and the other thing that Aisha had explained during the finance meetings is that what was happening annually is we were doing this budget, and then she was having to create another entire budget for the state reporting. So instead of doing 2 budgets in 1 year, she's just going to do 1 budget, and it's going to align to what we need to report to the state.
Right.
So
The numbers are the same.
I know.
Yes, the total numbers are the same.
And I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, because I guess I had walked out of the finance meeting thinking that we hadn't gone back to 22, 23, which I understood. But are we saying we haven't done it in 23, 24 either? Which is fine. I just want to. So it's only go forward that we've done
It's
it.
going forward, yes.
So then, can you just talk a little bit more about? I guess that why the teaching line stayed a lower number.
So because the budgeted line in 23-24 is a budgeted line, my budgeted lines are more accurate.
Yeah.
In terms of the teaching, the actual lines, one of the differences is also in terms of the lining up the special ed people.
Yeah.
So in terms of where it gets booked to as well. So what I
started the process of SPED last year.
Right, exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just one, and just for clarification, just in case
Yeah.
people look at this on the website, it might be helpful in.
Put the points in there and explain. Yeah.
No, well, yes, but under budget fiscal year and 23, 24, and actual fiscal year 22, just note that those are net of the grants.
Okay.
Because
Yep.
like if someone looks, they're gonna be like, why is
Right.
special ed tuition going up to 4.6
Yep.
million? It was only 700 last year.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if you were going to explain the other thing that's confusing all of this is the town is also going through a process with the new system. So you're converting everything over to the new system.
No, well, not exactly the new system, but what I'm working on doing as well is that I'm working on, there's a new budgeting system, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, got it.
But one of the things that we're working on is, and we haven't actually done that yet, but we're working towards doing that, is a chart of accounts to change that in a way that flows in.
Okay.
But we haven't quite gotten there yet, but we're working towards it.
Yes.
Yes.
That is a long process.
Yes.
With all the lines that you have in this
Yes.
department.
So that's that. But I guess the main thing the main takeaways from this is that it's kind of where we started off from what Dr. Adams had explained before in terms of what are our main budget drivers. And that continues to be our personnel, our utilities and heating, our special education, right? Okay. In terms of talking about revolving, we've done this before. What we're trying to do here is each of those revolving accounts have been set up based on athletic fees and different fees and tuitions. While we don't think that this is the main goal in any way of a school department, but in terms of what are Dr. Adams's goals as well is also to grow the preschool, and part of that it enables us to be able to grow the revenue along with the preschool as well. So in terms of preschool, And you'll see that we're using a lot of the funds from there to build the preschool for this year and next year. But we're hoping that there will be, we'll be able to replenish those accounts as time goes by as well, because we will be getting revenue from those departments as well too. I don't know, Dr. Adams, if you, I mean, in terms of your pre-K, the pre-K today, or Dr. Cataldo, rather, you probably have almost full classes in a lot of your spots for this year as well, right? So that's looking good in terms of growing those programs. Kids in Action, from the slides you saw before, in terms of Mrs. Sansoni's presentation, that program is also growing. We have 100 more students this year compared to other years. So although we're using a lot of the revolving in here, we strongly believe that that program will continue to grow, and we'll be able to replenish the revenue from there. So it'll always be able to support the budget as well, okay? And keep the program going. I think those are the main accounts. The athletics, we're raising the fees on that this year, hopefully, as part of your approval of the athletic line. By doing that, it means that we can keep abreast of coaching salaries. I think one of the proposals on the table is to have all of those salaries increase with the COLAs. Am I correct in saying so?
Yes.
And if that happens, there will be increases in coaching salaries for next year. And this athletic fee mainly covers the coaching costs. Not fully, but it mainly covers the coaching costs. So we want to make sure we keep abreast of those increasing costs as well. The field use, you'll see that this number has remained stable from year to year. The reason for that is that we're hoping that at some point in time, we will need to replace our turf fields, and this will be part of our contribution towards that replacement. Any questions here? Okay, good, thank you. This lovely chart here, which for some people might be like make you a little bit dizzy, depth perception and everything. What it does is that it combines all of the grants that we receive. What I've tried to do this year is if you look at the total number into the total offsets there, it's 6.9, and if you look at the slides before, it was 5 million in terms of grants and revolving. The differential here is that I've baked into this slide here the town's contribution of the 1.4, and also our MOU of 1.4, you'll see at the top. And I've also baked in an activity fee of 100,000 that we're hoping to put in place this year for the high school. That's 2. And a third thing that we put in here too that's kind of new, that we didn't have before, is that we also baked in the deficit, which I probably need to update to the new deficit number, which is the 600,000. I don't know what happened, Sherry. Which is the 600, imagine, Mary, 600,000 that we updated to as well. So this will get us back to all of our grants and our revolving. And then the next slide on this here, once we get through our revolving, we know that we have our fees. We're looking at a 5% increase in rental fees for our facilities. We're looking at the middle school activity and clubs is 100, and we're hoping to have a high school fee as well this year of 100. Kids in Action and pre-K, we've already gotten approval from you for increases in those fees. We've also looked at kindergarten and remaining keeping that cost still for this year at least. I know that last year it was a priority to increase it, but given the constraints that we have right now of increasing costs, I think that's the most prudent thing that we could do, is to leave that cost constant. And we spoke about the athletic fee increasing as well. And this is the part that we...
So you heard Mr. Smith talk about reductions. Remember, these reductions are reallocations that allow us to address salary. We had the library paraprofessionals, the math tutors, 2 positions. We believe that there are other additional math teaching positions that will help support continued MTSS and math at the middle school. one world language teacher, and we've added a librarian. The librarian would teach one section of grade 6 media literacy and then be available to sustain and support the library. The reason for that addition is to allow us to address what we believe are increased needs around related services at the middle and high school with increased speech and language and school adjustment. So that amount we're reserving and reallocating to address related service providers and ensuring that we have reasonable caseloads for those personnel. Speech and language, again, seems to be the majority of where our increases are. And then at the high school, you saw these already. However, there's an addition here of a history teacher. Again, that is to address what we believe going from 8th to the high school of increased speech and language needs at the high school as well. And/or related service providers around school adjustment counselors and making sure that we have reasonable caseloads. So you already saw the math and the ELA retirement, a 0.6 music teacher and the world language teacher. So that's that additional amount that was added to bring the number to 680,000.
Looking at all the reductions that we are looking at for this year, we have curriculum adjustments, technology adjustments, and those that Dr. Adams spoke about. And then in terms of dates that are coming up,
Sorry,
Yep.
so I just want to clarify. On these reductions, they're really reallocations.
Yep.
Because, okay, so we're not reducing the budget by 922,000.
Right,
That 922 is going someplace else. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to other areas, adjusting salary increases needed to balance the budget. You'll notice too in the list of reductions, we did not include professional development as part of the contractual bargaining agreements. There's discussion around raising tuition reimbursement, and we didn't feel like we could touch professional development, understanding that if people access that benefit more, we would need funding to provide for reimbursement according to those CBAs. So that's why it's not listed in those reductions.
Two questions, kind of clarifications, just to make sure that everyone listening is understanding. So those reallocations are in there to help address that deficit that we saw, but also it's come up several times about raising fees, and I just wanted to kind of clarify with you that the increased fee amounts are already in there, and that deficit is still with those increased fees. And you can see that high school, the activity fee will at an increase $100,000 that's being brought in, but that's still not enough to offset a lot of these costs, and same with those other fees. And that some of that deficit, it's my understanding, not being on the negotiation team, but I just wanted to confirm some of that deficit is because of increased costs to add specialists to cover the increase or the case load caps.
I think the first part of the question was in regards to, what was the first part? Lost the first part.
More, I just wanted to clarify that
The fees, the
the
activities.
fees are in there already within the budget, and you can see how much they're offsetting, because we had a lot of questions in the past about, can we just raise the fees more to cover the deficit? And it already is built into this.
So the fees help us address the increased COLAs, a majority of the COLAs for all of the activities at the high school. And the stipends, the teachers receive stipends for leading those, so that helps us address that. So that's the fees portion. And then the reallocation, those additional positions, allow us to address and be ready to provide reasonable caseloads for those related service providers.
Perfect, thank you.
Because of increased numbers.
Right.
Important dates?
Yep, important dates.
Be back at it on Wednesday.
Back on it on Wednesday, and then on the 13th we'll meet about advisory. Hopefully we get a vote from advisory on the budget. And then February 29th we have a joint session with all the boards, and then on the March 12th the school committee will meet and vote on the budget, And we have April 24th will be town meeting.
Just a logistical thing. On Wednesday, the negotiating team will be coming from the middle school, and we're ending at 6:30. So we'll get there as soon as we can.
Okay.
And then also a note on the date that we have a possible vote on March 12th. That's a Tuesday, so we just don't typically meet on Tuesdays. We typically meet on Mondays, but that Monday, the 11th, is the first night of Ramadan. So that's a Tuesday.
Okay.
So don't show up on Monday.
All right, thank you. Yes? Oh, I can't call anybody.
Oh, Nancy.
You have to come up, Nancy.
I just wanted to point out that on the AdCom calendar.
Nancy, I'm sorry. Can you come up because it doesn't pick up on, sorry, it doesn't pick up on Harvard Media.
Sorry, don't with that.
I just wanted to clarify, hello, Nancy McDonald, 190 High Street, that on the AdCom calendar, we are probably not going to do our final vote until March 19th. Yeah, which would be our custom, so, yeah. But the hearing is sooner than that. The hearing is on February 13th. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody in the public? Does anybody have any questions? And actually, this is the time for comments as well. So if you want to comment on the fiscal 25 budget, this is the public hearing portion of the meeting. If you don't mind throwing your hand up. Different than last year.
Is this a first?
Yes.
No.
No.
I think it's a first for me.
Okay, so if there are no questions, then I'm going to close out the public hearing portion of the meeting. So I need to take a motion.
I will make a motion to close the public hearing on the fiscal year 25 budget.
I will second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, so we will go back to the normal, go ahead, sorry.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Because
Always.
almost everyone in this room has to be here for the rest of the meeting, except for Heather.
Oh.
So would you want to, and since the budget relates to this very topic, that is item 9.1, do you want to do that? No?
Yeah, that'd be great. And
okay.
Yeah. Also, before we lose everybody, we will also be discussing, so it'll be our first time to deliberate the budget later on in the agenda. So if you are interested in hearing the committee's feedback and thoughts on that, hang in with us, please.
You're right, sorry, I just.
Yeah, no, that's good.
About it, I thought.
So 9.1, to receive a report of the college and testing placement data for the class of 2023.
Excellent, thank you so much for moving me on to the agenda. And thank you so much for the invitation to present this evening. So this was originally scheduled in December, but some of the data was not available from the Department of Education. So now that we have that, we've rescheduled and here we are. Oh, clicker, thank you so much. Turn it off and on for it to work, and the power button would be there. Okay. All right. All right. So while we're getting set, just a reminder, or for anyone hearing this report, I do it every year, but if it's the first time, this is a snapshot of the graduating class of 2023. And so when we put all the reports together, then we kind of can see trends, but this is primarily the graduating class of 2023. There are some data points, and I'll point out when the data provided to us refers to a testing year within the school year and is not specific to the graduating class. So I'll point out kind of what is what. All right.
So when we get there, thank you. All right, so is now when I turn off and on? All right. Okay. So that was the big open. Okay. Bear with me for one moment. Oh, okay. 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 Well, less than full screen mode is better than nothing, right? Less than full screen mode is better than nothing, right?
That works.
Does not seem to be working. Oh, okay. It's a PDF, yeah. All right.
During this musical interlude,
I know.
You know what? Would Alex, we and I were communicating about potentially doing a student advisory council meeting this week. Depending on when Alex gets back, because we have to post if it's going to be all of us, but we were thinking about Thursday. Are folks around? It would be, I think, morning. Are you thinking, or in the evening?
I was thinking
Evening.
We could do morning. What time would that be at?
Because what do we have?
This Thursday?
Yeah. What do we have Thursday night?
Yeah.
Sherry, what, you could scroll for Heather?
I can do Thursday.
You could. We could also just have 3 people go if people are busy. And then we don't have to post, and then it could be pretty flexible when the time is.
I can't go in the morning.
I can't go either.
If you want to find out 3 people go, you can.
Yeah.
Do you have 3 people?
All right, do you want to have 3
I'd like
people?
to go to.
And Ally?
Are we talking morning or
No. Sorry, what do you think, morning or evening?
I mean, I think we would prefer evening.
Okay.
I'm not sure when I would do it in the morning.
All right, so you
I
can't.
cannot do.
Ally, can you do
Sherry,
Thursday?
why don't you scroll?
You could,
Just
you
scroll.
can, you could,
Yes.
you could, could you? Can you? I could. But, all right, so why don't we do, all right, well, we can figure it out then. Sorry, she's right. Because there's 4 of us that can do it. Okay. I guess we could post. Just.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, are we good?
You're good.
All right, thank you. We're back. Okay, so the first point of data that we usually present is just we want to know, what do our students do after they graduate from Hingham High School? And so we have graduates who plan to continue their education, as well as a number of different types of opportunities. So this year we have last year's graduating class, we had 95.3% of them planning to continue their education directly after Hingham High School. You'll see on the slide that, so continuing education are the 4-year colleges, the 2-year or specialized schools, and then prep schools as well. Employment and apprenticeship, we don't consider continuing education. However, if you're obviously learning in the world of work as well, but they're not going on to higher education. And then the gap year programs, the students that choose to do that, many of them, it is a gap year in terms of a gap in their education. They do go on to do more education following that. They're just taking a break, doing a service project, or determining kind of what the best next step is for them. So that can look a bunch of different ways. And then we have students who are undecided in their plans. And if we look at trends, this is not on the slide, but on in the report that was presented, we've been kind of going up in the percentage of students that are choosing to continue their education directly after high school over the past few years. All right, so this is just graphically, it shows you the vast majority of our students are choosing to go to four-year colleges directly after high school. There's a much smaller number who are choosing two-year and specialized schools, and then students who are choosing to attend prep school as well. Then for those choosing to either delay their continuing education or following a different plan, that's kind of how it breaks out. Again, very small number of students, very small percentage, but employment or apprenticeship for a trade is one category. Military service is another category. Gap year or other program. And then we do have some students who just truly don't know exactly what it is they're going to do when they leave us. They all come up with some sort of plan, but then we don't know at the time that we're asking them. They were undecided. All right. So where do our students who are applying to colleges apply most often? UMass wins. You can see we had 123 students in last year's graduating class apply to UMass. And then we have some of our area state schools are up in the top as well. So UVM and New Hampshire, as well as University of Rhode Island, are always kind of in the top 10. So that, I think if you want to know direct numbers for any of the schools, I have access to that as well. Next, we have students who attend colleges. Where do they go? And we see that they most often go to UMass Amherst. And then it varies a little bit slightly from where they apply, where they actually attend. We see Providence jump up there, and then UVM, UNH is still there. So those are the typical colleges that our students apply to, and then those are the ones they choose to attend. UMass Amherst, we had 23 of our students attend last year.
How did we get so much interest in Montana State? I feel like there has to be a story there.
You know what? As I've seen over the number of years that I've been here, counselors learn about colleges in different parts of the United States, and we encourage students to go, and we have varying degrees of success of getting them to think outside of New England. And then one or two kids learn something about a school that's not typical, and as soon as it gets the seal of approval from a student, all of a sudden we have a lot of applications. So some brave souls test out a school that they may have a connection to or found or liked a particular program at, and then it gets a seal of approval. So that's generally what we find. That happened with when I first started here, no one would go to the South. And then the South was okay. And then everyone realized that it's warmer there. And so we had more people going there. But where do our kids, next slide, thank you. Our kids go most often. They do stay in Massachusetts and New England, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont. So warmer climates have not yet broken through in the top 5.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I was thinking about it in the previous slide, and I don't know if this is something worth looking at, but I'm just thinking of kids' mental health and the kids who do early action 1 and 2, and the percentages of kids when they do apply early, get in early versus, does that change over time? Have you seen a increase or decrease for the kids who are getting into their, their top choices in that first couple of months, or is it just sporadic every year?
It changes every year. Admissions can be cyclical. It could also feel like a completely different game every single year. And so because we haven't yet finished the full admission cycle, we're only through early action, early decision at this point, we can't really have a perspective, at least for this year, of what happened and how things are changing yet. So we do find that It used to be that we had 60 to 70% of our students go early action, which means they're taking advantage of admissions deadlines in November, December. And then the rest would go regular decision, which is January 1st-ish. Now we're up to, I think, pretty much 90% of the kids who apply to colleges are applying by the early deadlines. So it has migrated certainly much earlier in the year. What does that mean writ large? Typically,
sorry.
oh yeah.
Sorry, they can't see the slides on Zoom.
Oh no.
Thank you.
Yeah, just let you know.
Thank you.
Having technical difficulties.
Okay.
It will be on the recording.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Excellent. Yes, yeah, we'll post it on the counseling website and we'll get it up. Yeah.
Me to share it?
Yeah.
Do you want me to try to share it? Yeah, sure.
That's okay. Don't worry.
Oh.
So in general, kind of big picture nationwide, students who apply early are typically the ones that feel they are ready to apply earlier and don't need their senior year grades to be considered as much of a part of their application process, because typically if you're applying by November, we don't even have first term grades by that admission deadline. And so those are the students who feel that their high school journey accurately represents where they are, and they don't need to continue to show increased performance. So for any students, and counselors work with individual students with their individual cases, so I'm speaking generally right now. But if students feel that they're prepared, also that senior year can be very busy, and some kids that have sports or had intensive summer activities, just completing the college application process along with your senior year can be difficult. So kids who have the resources to do that and get it done early and just kind of want to put that to bed and then wait, apply in the early process. Kids who may need to take a little bit of time, they may have increased responsibilities in the fall and need to, push that deadline a little bit, may wait till the regular deadline. We also find sometimes it's our students in the arts, not always, but sometimes, where if they need to, in addition to their application, submit a portfolio or do an audition process, sometimes those deadlines are a little bit later in the year. So we have seen most of our kids apply during the early process, but that's certainly not a requirement, and that's not necessarily the best thing for every single kid. And we do see a number of kids who have two different batches. So they'll have a batch of schools that they apply to early, and then if they get some answers or not, depending on how things play out, they may add a different batch of schools, either to reach higher or reach more safe, depending on the student. So did that answer?
Yes, it did.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So those are most attended. So now we move on to our scores. So SAT scores. As we know, there is change in how colleges are treating SAT. So SAT is a common nationwide test. Same with the SAT, the ACT, they're two different testing companies, but colleges will take either. Through COVID, because people were physically limited from being in person taking tests, there wasn't a lot of access to testing. And then as the result of COVID playing out and not having access to tests, a lot of colleges suspended their requirement for testing if they had them. Some schools are test optional, which means they do not require a student to submit test scores in the admission process. They will leave it up to the student to choose whether to do that or not. So we've seen kind of a steady performance on SAT scores, but sometimes the number of kids during COVID dipped a little bit. It seems to be rebounding a little bit, but the mean scores seem to be right in line with where they have been in the last few years. I think when we did see a dip, it was when schools were test optional and students felt like their scores either didn't reflect where they thought they would perform, or it didn't fall in the middle 50% of what colleges reported as being acceptable scores, or where their mean scores fell or higher. Students sometimes will opt not to submit tests if it's not kind of in the upper half. So we see that, and now this is one of those instances where the DESE data is using the testing year. So this is not based just on the class of 2023. This is anyone who took the SAT in that school year. And 73% of the graduating class still did take the SAT, even though a lot of schools are test optional, because either one of the schools that they were applying to required the test, or they just decided they were going to take it just to have it in case they wanted to submit scores. So if we see for the class of 2023, the mean combined 1600 score was 1216. But if we see all students in that testing year, it was, 1228. And we compare very favorably to the state of Massachusetts and to the national. The state of Massachusetts, the combined 1600 score is 1112. We're at 1216 with just the graduating class, and the national mean score is 1028. Then the DESE provides some demographics, so we just like to give a snapshot of some of our different subgroups. Of course, we don't have means for absolutely everything because they don't report data for groups smaller than 10, because then you can identify some things. So this just chart shows where all students fall, and then students that are in different categories. So low income, students with disabilities, they only reported 2 on their website today. There were 3, so something must have gotten updated. But again, that was small.
Whether it's 2 or 3, why do so few kids with disabilities take the SAT? That's shocking to me.
That's an outlier for this year. That shocked me as well. I looked back at the past few years, and it's been 10, 12, 10, 12. So it's been pretty consistent. And the state, again, will define students with disabilities for this purpose as kids that are currently on an IEP that doesn't take into account any student who has accommodations or is not on a disability plan, such as a 504.
Yeah, or a student who has a disability but dropped their IEP.
Correct. Right. Or isn't on any plan, right? Yep. But yeah, that was definitely an outlier from previous years. All right, moving on. The trend for SAT scores were pretty close to being a flat line, which is great. We had a little bump in 2021, which I think the test optional thing played into it. So when kids didn't have to, that was when like the vast majority of schools did not need testing. So we saw a little bump because the kids choosing to test were the ones who felt very confident in taking the test and knew that they wanted to use the score. Moving on to the ACT, also a college entrance exam. Colleges will take either the SAT or the ACT. They don't have a preference, either one, so it's whatever suits the student's testing style. We offer a pre-ACT to our sophomores, which is a precursor to the ACT, and a PSAT to juniors before they take the SAT in their junior year, so they can get a sense of which test works with their testing style the best. So we had 35% of the graduating class took an SAT, whereas 73% took the SAT. So a fewer percentage of the graduating class takes the ACT. It's not quite as popular as the SAT. So that is that data. And then same thing, we report, the ACT gives us some demographics into different subgroups. So we want to just lay out the performance for all those subgroups so you can see those.
Did any students with disabilities take the ACT?
They don't report that.
Oh.
So yes, because I just happen to know, because when students have disabilities that are not just 50% extended time, if it's anything greater than that, or use of a computer or something, they can't do it at a national test site. They have to do it school-based, and we have a handful every year. So I know that there are students with disabilities who do take the ACT as well. And ACTs over the past 7 years are pretty similar. It's been going up in an upward trend. Moving on to advanced placement courses. So advanced placement courses are college level courses taught at the high school. They're offered by the College Board. It's a common curriculum. We go through an audit process to make sure that we are delivering the same curriculum as what is delivered everywhere else that offers these courses. So we had 593 AP exams taken by 314 Hingham High School students. We offered 20 different AP classes. There were 316 graduates in the class of 2023, and 168 of those students were seniors. They took 360 of the AP exams. So we do have students in grades 11 and 10 who take AP exams as well, but the vast majority are seniors. So that was 53% of the graduating class took an AP, at least one AP exam. And in recent years, we have started to try and add more and varied AP courses and looking at some of those traditionally more accessible AP courses so we can get even more participation. So one of those courses this year, for the first time, we're offering AP Environmental Science, just for example. These are the areas in which we do offer AP exams. So this year, in the class of 2023, we offered 20. We're up to 22 now in our current school year. The next slide will show you just a sense of which classes have the most enrollment. So Spanish literature was very popular last year. It's come down a little bit. But we see a lot of the English, history, sciences. So it's not just contained into one curriculum area. We have broad participation across all curriculum areas. And then the next slide shows you a little bit about demographics, but I did some digging and I have some additional information as well, because students with disabilities is not a category that the College Board reports on. So 8.3% of AP students were on a disability plan. And I can follow up in an email if that's helpful for anyone tomorrow. So that was 26 students were on a disability plan when they were in AP classes. The majority of
disability plan, you mean IEP or my
IEP or 504.
Okay.
So more to come on that in 1 second. So 23 of those were 504 plans, 3 were IEPs, and the reason I say that is because again, DESE considers a student with a disability by definition actively on an IEP. We did have students who had moved from an IEP to a 504 within their high school time. So there were 3 more of those. So at some point we did have 5 out of the 26 students with disabilities that had been on an IEP. And the mean score for students with disabilities was 4.2 on all those tests that they took. So that helps it's in line with some of the other demographics as well. So our next slide will just kind of show you the trend for AP scores in the last 5 years. They've been going up. AP Scholar Awards. These are created by the College Board, and there's different categories. The higher you score on the more tests gets you different designations. They did pull back on a few awards that they used to offer because they found that they were offering awards that encourage students to stretch themselves a little too thin. So if you took like 7 AP exams and got a certain, a 4 or a 5, then you would get an award, and that's just a lot. When we're talking about high school students who are in high school taking all college level courses, that's just a lot. So thankfully, I think with a nod to social emotional health, they scaled those higher number awards back. But we do have 49 students getting an AP Scholar Award, and that is students who receive a grade of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. scholars with honor, 3 or higher on 4 or more exams. We had 29 of those students. Scholar with distinction, students with grades of 3 or higher on 5 or more exams. So they kind of capped out at 5. Just for some perspective, students can take a maximum of 7 classes at the high school. So that if students taking 5 AP classes, that's the majority of their day. And so we had 38 students with AP Scholar with distinction. They have a new-ish capstone program, so there's a 2-class series of AP courses called AP Seminar and AP Research, which are not necessarily content-driven, but they're research and query-driven. And so students can do a lot of different work, and they do presentations, and they have kind of challenge projects. So that has its own little designation and certificate. So we had 6 students earn the AP Seminar and Research Certificate, and that we find really prepares students for college level research, which is great. So if we look, just the next slide kind of gives you a visual depiction of what kind of AP Scholar Awards that our students win by year. And then moving on to national merit, this is based off of PSAT scores. So it is the practice test for the SAT. We have semifinalists in some years, and other years we don't. Last year we had 1. We had 8 students who earned a commendation, and 4% of the class was recognized for their proficiency in taking the PSAT. And that's just a graphic representation, so you can see that. And that is the conclusion of the formal presentation portion. So if you have questions, I am happy to answer.
Does anybody have any questions?
I guess just a general question. We hear all these talk about how trends in college admissions is changing. It's a different world now. And where do you think things are going? Just an easy question. It's
Sure. We hear from colleges that they are looking to diversify their applicant pool and their classes more than they have been in a number of different ways. So it's not just ethnic and racial diversity, but learning diversity, diversity of interests, diversity of skills, because now that we're in the information age, we have been for a while, but you have fingertip access to so much content that it's kids with different skills who can kind of synthesize and put things together and present information in new and provocative ways. And so it's just kind of the landscape isn't just the highest grades and with the highest test scores, and that's definitely the cutoff and they're in. It's kids with different skills and how they come together and different talents. So that plays out completely differently at all the schools, but I think there's an emphasis on certainly first generation college going students who have been systematically disadvantaged in admissions and other processes before. So they're trying to get a wider pool of students who have the potential to achieve in a bunch of different areas. So that's why I think, obviously this year still has to play out, and we'll see how that changes. And then again, no one year defines anything because there's trends and we kind of look at that. But I think that's where we're seeing things go, is just trying to admit broader swaths of kids.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Anybody in the public have any comments or questions? Okay.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Are we losing our quarter for a minute?
It's a long one. Okay, so we will, I don't know whether ACES wants to adjourn. Oh, no, because we have our budget discussion. You don't want to adjourn. Okay, so I'm trying to see with the other two gone, we've got approval of minutes. We could,
Do you want to do public comment?
yeah, we could do public.
Anybody has anything?
Anybody in the public have any questions or comments? This is the part of the meeting where we set aside 15 minutes for things that are not on tonight's agenda. If you would like to raise a question or comment, you could throw your hand up. Okay.
All right, On the minutes?
Yeah, so let's do the minutes. We have a form. All right, so we have one set of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on January 22nd, 2024.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. All right, so we will move on to
Do you want to do the student?
item 6. Yeah, you guys want to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so item 6, we're going to do 6.
We're all over the place.
No, sorry, 7. Item 7, student communications.
All right.
Gentlemen.
So students were excited to learn that Hingham High was named the American Field Service Global School of the Year this past Wednesday. That was exciting. 24 Hingham High School students participated in the Harvard Model UN, which is kind of a big honor that our school is invited to that. We represented China and Pakistan. It was a fun combination. Tonight, or a few hours ago now, at 7 p.m. was the open mic night, which was sponsored by our music department. Students will be dismissed at 11:30 on our early release this Wednesday. And
this week, the high school is holding Unity Week, in which a number of events planned by HHS students promote the overarching vision of the HHS Unity Project to ensure that our school committee is characterized by its core values of respect, inclusion, safety, and equity for everybody. A few of these events include daily dress-up themes such as red, white, and blue today, purple for Maddie's Promise tomorrow, or orange for NEFCure on Thursday, just to provide a couple of examples. Today, students received a visit from motivational speaker Earl Granville, an Afghanistan and Iraq war veteran who spoke before whole school assemblies. This Friday, HHS students will be visiting elementary schools to serve as guest readers. And also this week, we'll be hosting food drives for the Hingham Food Pantry at home basketball games, both for the boys and girls team, on Tuesday and Friday. Anyone who donates at least one non-perishable food item will be admitted to the game for free in place of a ticket. And there will also be a movie night held on Friday, which will be free for HHS students after the basketball game.
Nice.
This week is National School Counseling Week, and a perfect time to say thank you to the incredible crew of counselors at HHS, and thank them for all of their work in the college admissions process and everything else. This next Monday at 6:30 p.m., HHS will deliver its annual Program of Studies night, where parents will have the opportunity to meet with department directors and coordinators in the school cafeteria, and student volunteers will provide building tours for any interested parents. Registration is open for the HHS preschool program. A few openings remain, but they probably will not be lasting much longer. And also, starting last week, seniors have had the opportunity to explore many of the Town of Hingham scholarship opportunities. Each year, over $350,000 in scholarships are given out to our graduating class, aiding our students in continuing their education at an exceptional rate past high school. All applications must be submitted by 3 p.m. on Friday, March 8th. And lastly, as we previously discussed, the Student Advisory Committee hopes to meet with the school committee this Thursday evening to discuss the impact of mid-years on students, and we hope to collect more information from the guidance office and students to inform any potential policy changes in this area. And that's about it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we've jumped around. We're gonna head back to item 6, which is the superintendent's report. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Adams.
Yep, so briefly, in the superintendent's report, just sharing that we had our preschool, pre-K lottery today. We had to do lotteries for all of our programs, the full day and half day programs. We hope to send out letters as soon as tomorrow, as well as registration forms to the accepted families. And then we'll be working our way down the list, the wait lists, in order to make sure all of our peer placements for the integrated preschool pre-K program are filled. KIA also held its lottery today as well, and also has waiting lists for every one of its programs as well. Kindergarten registration is now open. New families can download the registration packet at the website, fill it out, and take it to their respective schools. We're excited. Thank you to Katie Roberts and a whole host of teachers on this Wednesday early release. Middle school and high school colleagues will be presenting as part of the Technology Fellows. So they did some training in the summer and this fall and created their own projects, and they'll be sharing with their colleagues on Wednesday during the early release ways that they've thought about integrating technology into the classroom. We will sometime in March be presenting a draft of the Student Opportunity Act to the school committee. You won't have remembered this. It was sometime during COVID 3 years ago. You approved one. It is a requirement of legislation that was passed that resulted in some increases in Chapter 70 aid, which for Hingham is very small. It's only $30 per student, but it does require a plan. We'll be sharing that plan. The educational subcommittee today looked at we had some beginning conversations about what that plan will need to look like. It'll need to include 3 goals that address some gaps in the school that we've identified, and a plan to address those. It has an April 1st deadline, so we're still waiting for some information from the state in order to draft those goals, but we'll be seeking feedback from different groups over the next month or so in order to be ready. The school building committee met in if you've driven by the Foster or new elementary building, you will have seen it quickly going up, including, there's building A and building B. One building is quickly going up faster. That's where the classrooms are housed. You'll see more mechanical and electrical and plumbing are really ongoing in those. That building, interior framing is complete on that building B on levels 2 and 3. And my update might be even late. There's been probably more progress made since then. We'll be ordering furniture in the first week of April so that it's received by the beginning of school and ready. We've also had discussions about the technology needed for the building, and we'll put in some orders so that's also ready for the opening of school on mid-August. The students shared that Hingham High School was honored with the AFS USA Global School Award. So we're excited, and we'll learn more about that award in the coming weeks. We were able to send a delegation to receive the award in Virginia later this month. We've received information from Metco Inc. around some longitudinal research that they've done on the impact of Metco. They tracked students for 6 years and showed that the students in Medco who were in the program made substantial gains in math and English language arts. MCAS, they had increased attendance. Their high school dropout rates decreased according to their peers. When compared to their peers, they had increased SAT test taking and scores as well, increased college acceptance and enrollments as well. And long-term, they had increased earnings and employment. By the end of February, we'll also be sharing letters with families to indicate and point them to the school and district report cards. These are issued by the state and show information around assessments and accountability results, teacher qualifications, and other district school performance information. So there's one for the district, and then there's one for each school. There are already links already on the website, but we'll share a formal letter pointing families to those report cards as in the coming month. And I gave you a copy of the district report card that was online as well. And then I also added the personnel report, which I misplaced at the moment, but.
I had you pull it out, that's why.
Yep, I pulled it out earlier and it's out of order.
John, I messed you up.
So it indicates that we had 2 paraeducators, one for East and Foster. We had 2 resignation of paras at Foster and South. And then we're in need of a Medco bus monitor, a bus monitor for the district, a custodian for the middle school. There's an offer pending. Paraeducators, we had reported earlier, 2 at South, 1 at Foster, 2 at the middle school, 1 at the high school. And then I also shared a memo on a timeline for the hiring of a permanent executive director for student services, as well as a job description. We'll post that by the end of this week, if not tomorrow, as soon as possible, so we can begin recruitment.
The job description that's 5 pages long shows you what unicorns these positions are. So
Yes, and we're grateful to
appreciate everyone who's in those roles.
We're grateful for Dr. Cataldo's help this year in that role, and have learned so much from her. We're so grateful for her energy and expertise. In honor of time, because of the meeting, the budget discussion, I'll move there was a request from the chair to move the formative artifacts to an upcoming meeting, so I'll just slide those over to another meeting so we can continue the rest of the meeting.
Thank you for doing that. Recognize we had a lot to tackle tonight. Okay, so back to communications. Communications received by the superintendent. Anything, Dr. Adams? No. Okay, so students, we got anybody on the committee? No. All right, so item number 8, to discuss the proposed FY25 budget. So we have heard an update. Aisha and Margaret gave us an update on where things would be depending on where negotiations end up. Last year, we didn't vote at this time because of the override and things were still in flux. Still feeling like it's still in flux right now with negotiations going on, so thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss and start to deliberate, but we won't plan to vote until early March. That will give us more opportunity to know where negotiations might end up. So this is our first pass at giving thoughts. Who wants to start? Don't all jump out of your chairs.
Michelle,
any thoughts? I got-
Get feedback on the reductions as well, as we plan for the time going forward, at least what we have to date. If you agree with it, if it's reasonable, I don't know, just to get some feedback from that as well.
Yeah, the current reductions, not the
Yes.
reduction, not further reductions if we end up going at a higher COLA rate than what we currently have in there, correct?
Right, yeah,
Okay,
the
got it.
current one.
Yeah, so the current, yeah.
Hopefully
I
we'll
mean,
all agree at where we are, we wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I do,
Sorry, go ahead.
just seeing the math tutors on there, it does bring me a little bit of pause, because they're not, but they haven't been there for very long, correct? We added them 3 years
21?
ago.
I think those math tutors were funded at one point through Title I,
Okay.
and then they were shifted over into the regular budget. In talking to Mr. Smith, he has an additional math teacher.
Okay.
He's 10 math teachers, so we'll have 1 for each team. And I believe there's a math specialist. There's another position as a math specialist. So with those 2 positions, he believes he can continue the MTSS that's in place with those positions. And be able to do some better scheduling around really purposefully scheduling them and planning ahead with the iReady data, that we have some really good data about who are the students and what their needs are and can plan purposely for that.
So the going to the 8th grade teaming, does that help that at all?
It'll help scheduling because we'll be able to sort of team students. We'll be able to better allocate special ed resources to in 8th grade and really dedicate the resources in a better way. Mr. Smith is also working with his team all year long this winter and spring with Aspen in order building the schedule throughout the winter and spring, so that before the school year ends, all of the students are scheduled, and using all of the expertise of the staff that's in place during the school year in order to make sure that students are placed correctly. Lots of talk about making sure our special education students are placed first, so that we ensure that their needs are met in the schedule, and we have the resources needed to provide special education services first. So.
Yeah, it's my understanding those math tutors aren't the ones that we added during the pandemic.
They weren't, okay.
They were already there for Title I.
Okay.
But I guess my thoughts on this is we really need to protect that multi-tiered system of supports. When we start talking about layoffs, which hopefully we won't have to do anymore, people start thinking about last in, first out. But I think we really need to keep that system intact. We heard from the principals last time about how important that was and what a difference it's made. We've seen the data about how much of a difference it's made. So I think I guess agree. I mean, we don't want to lay anyone off, but if that's what you propose seems to make sense. And if we do end up looking at further reductions, I think we really need to protect that system. So because it's an opportunity to intervene early, and then hopefully they won't need it.
Right.
If I can pile on to what Carrie was saying, I think we're going to have just to preview next week or next meeting a little bit. We looked at some of the data, middle of the year data, the educational programming subcommittee, and it's not just looking at, it's sort of all the MTSS things that we were doing with it last year. It's also a way to evaluate the new reading program that we have and find some actual data on how effective is this program. And as we move into the future and I look to getting new math curriculum, I think we need to not just to demonstrate how our students are learning, but to really show that we're making good decisions with the curriculum that we're purchasing for the district and being able to defend that curriculum, those choices. That wasn't a new point, that was just Carrie's point.
Any thoughts on fee increases, not reducing kindergarten further?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love it, but I don't really know. So I don't love not reducing kindergarten. I said before, I'm not a huge fan of the activity fees for all. Unfortunately, I don't feel like we have much ability here, because if we decrease kindergarten or eliminate the activity fees or reduce them to some degree, or don't add the athletic fees, I mean, it's staff. And so it's not ideal for the families, obviously, but I think it's probably worse to have less teachers in the building for the families. So I don't like it, but I don't, I support it. Because I just don't see another way.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, and I agree with everything you're saying, 100%. I mean, it is, I will mention, it isn't in the strategic plan. It was one of our spokes, if the correct terminology. But unfortunately, you can't foreshadow back then as to where we would be with the budget right now. And yeah, I agree. It's student-facing positions are, I think, more important.
I think the hard part is going to be getting the public to understand after the override that there still are these types of decisions that we have to make this year within the budget. And we had said it last year during the process that it didn't mean there weren't going to be difficult decisions this year, but seeing it actually laid out, I think the decisions in front of us aren't good, but they all have to be focused about protecting the students and what's best for the students and not dismantling anything in the MTSS, because we are making strides and really focusing on the best decisions that we can make with what we have to work with, which we knew in advance what we had to work with. So
yeah, and I'll just add back to that kindergarten. I would like to see that it each year to still have it brought up and just if there's any way. I just don't want it to be forgotten.
Yeah, to that point, can you remind me what we had not committed to, but last year, what was if we had done what we had said we were going to do this year, What was the dollar amount reduction?
It's 500.
I think it was 500 reduction every year.
Try to reduce it over 5.
And how much is that in, what is it, 100?
It's probably
300 or 2?
per students.
Yeah, we have about 275.
275, okay.
So that's like about 137,500. So,
Yeah.
About a teacher and a half.
Yep.
And I think, some of the reductions that you're proposing is in line with what you thought was going to happen based on the staffing audit that was done, correct? Like we knew that we had things that we could button down based on that staffing audit.
Well, it's also in response to some decreased enrollment at the high school and the middle school, and the shared class size ratios for classes currently. So it's in line with both the staffing, declining enrollment, and class size ratio, which
Okay.
the staffing audit
The
kinda
high school class
highlighted.
was large last year when they left, so it wasn't necessarily.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I was thinking in my head, I'm like, how did it drop? But it was that big class that left.
Yep.
And then the other big class is the current sophomores, right? I think the current sophomore class is pretty big.
Slowly, not as much anymore.
Not as
Not
much.
as much.
No,
We
okay.
lost some in
Okay.
8th grade in the transition between 8th and 9th grade, which is still a pressure point for us. We're losing some students between that transition between 8th and 9th. And some are coming back too in the high school years, but not to offset what we've lost between that transition.
Tim?
I don't know if this is a question for Barbara or Margaret, but we sort of largely talk about the out-of-district placements as a huge cost that's almost completely out of our control. Do you which in the short term, it certainly is completely out of our control. Do you see a world where we can do anything with Hingham to, in the future, require few out-of-district placements and be able to educate more of Hingham's kids in Hingham?
Some builds programs in-house.
I don't know if that's building programs in-house. I don't know if that's building up. So I'm sort of, it's a very open-ended question.
It is very open-ended
Yes.
question. I'm going to respond with an open-ended answer.
Perfect.
So yes, you've always heard me say since I got here, I really believe we invest in our children and keep our children in the district. If we're not able to keep our children in the district, then we should be looking at why our children leave the district and see how we can build capacity to honor a place for them in our district. I will never suggest that you have a classroom of one, or as I say, a party of one, because that does not do anything for a child's growing opportunities. But I do believe that as a district, having had an opportunity of people come in and look at our programs, working with all of the faculty here in the district, which I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I hope I can make someone have a miserable experience. That's not what we have happen here. People come ready to teach and help our children learn and expand. But we do have to build programs. At the same time, every one of us in this district as administrators and educators in the classrooms, we all assume responsibility between understanding and having a complete knowledge of universal design so that children can learn in a variety of ways. I'm one of those children, I'll be very honest. People hand me charts and I'm like, no, I need it to look like this. So we need to be able to present various opportunities in the classroom and various ways of learning. Not everything is a test, it could be a project. Not everything is just one way where we lecture to children or it's all worksheets. So I think that's a big piece through MTSS and what we do moving forward is we grow capacity with who we have in the district. And we have many talented people sitting here right inside the walls of our schools that I know want to see the children succeed. So I think as you do that and everybody owns a piece of it and we find a way to calibrate so everybody has a toolbox that really goes far and really goes deep at the same time that you build programs, then parents will have that trust to say, I want to make sure my children stay here. I want them to have a neighborhood experience. And I think we owe it to our children to find a way to make that happen. And yes, this is a really precarious time, but I think you've hit the precipice and now we know what we have to do. We're getting a sense of direction. We can do it. We absolutely can. Well, I won't be here to see it all happen.
I'll come back and visit.
I'll stay.
One of those programs is what you were talking about, the therapeutic programming.
Yes.
Can you elaborate? I don't know whether
So
the best.
we started a small group that's going to expand to include some principals, and we can grow the group over time. That's going to start to look at SEL, behavioral health programming, which might be a therapeutic program. That group is going to start with some needs assessment. We want to collect some data on the current needs of students, look at where our students are going, why they're going, what are the current systems and processes that are in place for behavioral health. And then we also want to, we've collected a list of programs in the area that we want to go visit and learn from and collect resources and information from. What are the staffing models? What are the curriculum that they're using? What are the processes? How does the program get integrated with the rest of the building? So we want to do all of that work into the spring, and this is going to take us into next fall, which will then allow us in the next budget cycle to say, these are the programs we want to start, and this is the staffing that we'll need, or to think about a rollout that's 2 to 3 years down the line. We'll also have, the Foster will be open, that building has additional spacing for elementary programming, and that seems like a perfect location, and was planned to think about what are some of the programming that was needed in order to support our special needs students. So we've already started that work. It'll continue into the spring and then begin again in the fall to be ready for next budget cycle. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I noted, I look at this all the time, but I was like, tonight, I'm like, whoa. When Aisha put up on the screen, looking at the projections of where we have a greater number of students on IEPs versus where we don't. Right now, it's at the elementary school, and while we know that the pandemic has impacted all students, particularly at the secondary level, we see a rise in depression, we see a rise in anxiety, we see a rise in school refusal, and then we just see a rise of checking out. And we know we have work there. But if you look at the elementary, you'll notice that there's a higher number of IEPs, and well, it's assumed we'll always have a higher number at the elementary level because we're building foundation. Those are the kids that are coming out of the pandemic. And I think as we have more consistency over the forthcoming years in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see some of those things will diminish because they won't have the same environment where they're segregated from like peers and different peers where they're just with peers and understanding the whole social norms of being with their peers. So I think you'll see a lot of what we're seeing now as outcomes. There won't be outcomes in about 3 to 5 years, provided there's no more pandemic. So, my answer is that I think you're going to see some of those changes at the same time building those programs internally. I think it's hugely needed. Are we always going to be able to measure some of the programs against what's out there? No, but there is no reason why, with the capacity and the talent that we have in this district, that we can't do it. I will be your biggest cheerleader. You can do it.
Thank you.
You won me over.
Anything else?
We'll have a couple more opportunities to discuss it.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about that. We have our February, so we don't have a meeting in 2 weeks, right? It's 3 weeks down the road because of February break. So it's February, whatever that date is, the 26th. Mm-hmm. And then the next one after that is March 12th, which will be the one that we will plan to take a vote. So would you like to discuss again at the next meeting, or do you want to just hold off, get a salary negotiations update at the next meeting, and then continue to deliberate on the 12th and vote?
I think it's a good idea to do. Keep the conversation going.
Because it seems like a ways out.
Yeah, it is. I know.
It is, and there's still a lot up in the air. I mean, I think we can all agree that we don't want to do less than 68 million. Am I going out on the limb by saying that? Nobody wants to do less than 68 million? Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just got to keep doing it. Talking about it.
Okay. All right. So that concludes the budget. Do you want to adjourn your ACES subcommittee?
Yes, thank you very much.
You sure?
I would like to adjourn our ACES subcommittee meeting for this evening. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to bounce. We did 9.1. We're going to go to 9.2 to discuss substitute rates and act as appropriate. So I take it Aisha's taking us through this.
Yes, thank you very much. What we're finding in terms of our substitutes is that sometimes we do not need people for a full day. We just need them for maybe half a day. And because we only have a full day rate for substitutes, what is happening is that sometimes we have to fill the void of trying to fill the time when we have someone come in for full day, right? And I think in terms of trying to find more substitutes as well, if we only have a need for half a day and we try to get someone for half day, maybe we will be able to better get staff and substitutes in as well. So the request here is to for both the short-term rate and the non-contracted, I've kind of changed it up a little bit. In the past, we had a 10-day rate and then a beyond the 10-day rate as well, which was kind of difficult to track in terms of trying to monitor how many days a sub has worked for and then changing the rate. So right now what we're doing is that we're standardizing it in terms of a non-contracted substitute rate, and then once the person breaks that kind of like the 60-day kind of time frame, then we'll go into a contracted kind of period. And we'll have both the half day and a full day rate for both.
This may also, there are some substitutes who only can work a half day, so it may also help with some substitute coverage. I can only do a half day, now we have a rate to pay them for the half day.
Can I ask a question about the contracted? Is that in one sub position, like one long-term sub position, or if I come in for the next 90 days and cover 90 different teachers?
So there's a different rate for that.
Okay.
So once you go over the 90 days and you kind of into the contract kind of, the teacher's contract, and then that's based on usually depend on your skill level, etc. And the superintendent has the.
Can I change my hypothetical to 89 days then?
Yes. So between the 60 to 89 days, that would be the contracted short-term substitute.
Right. Is it in one sub position, or can it be in several sub positions?
It's in one.
Okay.
Position.
Thank you.
So for example, if we have a maternity leave, for example, that would be what would happen.
And the difference in the rate would really be to explain that a contracted short-term sub would be responsible for lesson planning and doing other more long-term things, as opposed to a short-term sub, which is just there to be there for the day.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or half a day.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions.
All right. Somebody make a motion?
Ready for a motion? All right. I will make a motion to institute a rate for half a day of substitute coverage of non-contracted substitute rate of $62.50 for a half day, and contracted short-term substitute rate for a half day of $153.12.
I will second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, all set. 9.3 to discuss approving the designer architect for the dock and act as appropriate. Take it you're taking us through this too.
Yes, please. So we're moving along in terms of the dock. We had an OPM, and now we're trying to get an architect. We posted an RFQ for the architect, and a few of us met. We reviewed we got 2 proposals, and the winning proposal, well, I won't say winning yet because it's subject to contract negotiations, but the person who created the schematics, or the firm that created the schematics, is kind of leading in terms of points right now. So depending on how the contract negotiations go between that firm and our negotiators, then we will determine who will be the finalist. So we're asking for your approval for Gourmet to be to be approved, subject to contract negotiations. And one of the reasons, primarily they did the schematics. So in terms of they've invested time into it, so they figured it'd be more efficient to keep them on to finish the project. And in terms of the relationships that have been developed, we know for a fact that we have good relationships with them, and we can work with them to complete the project as well.
Okay.
So based on these 2 factors, we would like to go ahead and get your approval for that, please, subject to contract negotiations.
Jen, do you have anything to add? Just our school committee liaison. Okay, great. Motion?
Yes, please. I will move to accept Golme Architect and Design as the architect designer for the Hingham High School dock, subject to successful negotiation of a contract.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, all set. 9.4, to approve grants and donations and act as appropriate. I think I saw something in the packet.
So we have the middle school
Contrast for you after if you need something for your voice.
Yeah, the middle school has 2 grants that they've received from HEF, Hingham Education Foundation, the total of which are $9,000. One of the grants is for the 8th grade class to receive a leadership seminar and assembly, and the second is for the leadership team at the middle school, to attend the NELMS conference. Based on the information, they were actually trying to bring back the joy in the middle school, and that's one of the things that they'll be learning at the conference. And one of our assistant principals will be presenting at the conference as well. So that's an added plus in terms of that as well. So just want to get your approval on those grants.
We are pro-joy.
Any
Yes.
questions? Okay.
I will make a motion to accept $9,000 in grants from the Hingham Education Foundation for the 8th grade Ed Garrity Leadership Assembly and Seminar and the NELMS conference.
Okay, one second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And then 9.5, I think I did see this, to approve surplus and act as appropriate.
Yeah, so we received some library books from reading at the library at South. Some of those books, they were mold, there was mold, broken spines, and other conditions. They hadn't been in circulation for a while. So we're just asking your approval to get those declared surplus and dispose of them at the least cost to Hingham.
Okay. Any questions? You want to make a motion?
I will make a motion, just clarifying, it's from the South School
Yes,
Library.
yes.
Okay. I will make a motion to declare surplus library books from the South School Library listed in our package, and to authorize the library coordinator to dispose of them at the least cost to the town of Hingham.
I will second. Any further discussions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. All right, so item 10, I'm going to just ask for any substantive reports. If you've got something substantive to report, in the interest of time.
Yeah, real quick, the SPED subcommittee meeting, our next meeting is on Monday at 5 p.m. There'll be some option.
Okay, great.
I just want to say that I did not give a heads up. Did I skip you?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
you did.
I'm so sorry, Ellie. I just wanted to say that the ed programming met today. We did not give a specific time in the last school committee meeting, so apologize for that. There was a very quick turnaround because we realized there was exactly one afternoon where central office staff was free this entire month, and we grabbed it. So we met today, but if you didn't go to that meeting, all of the data that was presented will be presented at the next school committee meeting. So there's plenty of opportunity to get the information.
Middle school council met today, and salary negotiations is meeting with Unit B with the state mediator tomorrow, and with Unit A on Wednesday.
Great, thank you. Nothing important. Okay, Michelle?
I'm good.
Okay, I have nothing. Okay, item 11, I did see that we have a couple things to discuss here. Other items not reasonably known within 48 hours of the meeting.
I have one thing, in terms of, one of our transportation manager brought to our attention that there's an EPA grant for electrification of buses. We're looking at applying for 3 electric buses using the company that we currently lease our buses from. There are about 3 buses that we own. The plan would be to turn these in, and if we did get the grant as well. But then in terms of that, HMLP has also signed off on in terms of we have to get HMLP to sign off that they are aware that we're trying to electrify the buses, and we also and part of the EPA application requires school committee approval that you are aware that we are applying for those. We have until 2026 to get the buses in place, so this is not a next year sort of thing. if we do get the grants or rebates, we have until then to actually fill in those buses. Our chances are not very high, unfortunately, in terms of getting those rebates, but we just want to put our hat in the ring, just in case we can qualify.
Does it commit us to anything?
It does not, no. We have until that time, and then we would then, if we chose to forfeit, we could.
Any other questions?
I just feel the need to say, whenever this discussion comes up, that electric buses are a great option and awesome. The most environmental thing that Hingham can do about our emissions is to have kids ride our big dirty buses that we have right now and not drive people individually to school. But I know the buses don't work for everyone, so. It seems like when so many kids are being individually driven to school, to make the leap from regular bus to electric bus isn't the most useful jump that could happen. But it's the jump that's in our control, so. That's just me battling a windmill, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, these buses are so expensive right now. I don't think, I wouldn't advise that we would replace all 22 buses.
No.
But I think in terms of the three, it would be a good first start.
Agreed.
Okay.
So you need, yes, please.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the application from the Environmental Protection Agency for the 2023 Clean School Bus Rebate Program for rebates for 3 new electric buses and to authorize the chair to sign the required paperwork on that to the committee.
I have a second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So before we get to item 12, the next school committee meeting we've got on February 7th. We have a joint meeting with the select board and advisory. We are slated to start at 7 p.m. Select board meeting starts at 6:15, but we will only start at 7. And then February 26th at 6:30.
Is it a joint meeting?
It is.
Or is it their meeting?
It's their meeting. We're joining with AdCom.
Okay.
February 26th.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the Monday after vacation, so just get ready for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tim. All right. Item 12, we are going to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session.
I will make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, for the purposes of approving minutes from the executive session held January 22nd, 2023. As an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
I so declare.
To provide an update on negotiations with HEA Unit A, B, and D. As an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
I so declare.
And to hear a grievance from HEA Unit A as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
I so declare. Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Matt?
Aye.
Allie? Tim?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
Michelle? Aye. I'm an aye as well. Thank you. We are adjourned.